Hey, it is Tuesday night in East Lansing, Michigan. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com. Come on in, gather around. Grab yourself a beverage and let us know what kind of beverage you got tonight. We're going to talk Michigan State basketball, Michigan State football. Lots to talk about on the Michigan State football and basketball athletics landscape. Exciting times. All of a sudden, Michigan State basketball rallying back into position to make the NCAA tournament for a 23rd consecutive year under Tom Izzo. And I told you last time we had one of these things, I wasn't sure. I wasn't predicting anything. But you guys know what two near expletives I used when talking about Tom Izzo, and that things like this were possible in a positive sense. And he has stirred it up, got that stew just right, just about. A couple of big wins, Michigan State. Big win over Michigan. And as I wrote in the .comp article at SpartanMag.com a couple days ago, beating Michigan, it was a rare instance in which beating Michigan was an afterthought. It was big to beat a top 5 team, get that pelt, and put that on the resume to get back into the NCAA tournament for a 23rd straight year. Duke not looking so good. So if Duke's streak ends, Michigan State continues. Michigan State gets in another couple of years, which is possible, I think, in the upcoming years. Can move up the ranks in terms of the longest streaks of consecutive NCAA tournament appearances in the history of college basketball. In Michigan State, that's a great thing to have for a program that is starting to think of itself as a blue blood program. Getting back in this year, I mean, blue blood form with those wins over Illinois and Ohio State, and then the second one against Michigan. Nothing short of inspirational for Michigan State. Joshua Langford, Aaron Henry, Rocket Watts, the things he's been going through to get that done. And without all the Tom Izzo practices that they normally have. That's why they were behind schedule for so long this year. They still won't have the usual number of practices that they normally would have at this time of year, but they're starting to gain some traction anyway. And I know, judging by some of the comments over at the Final Forum message board at SpartanMag.com, people are excited about it. I know you guys are all excited about it. Come on in, gather around. It's good to have some people coming in. Again, my name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com. SpartanMag.com is the Michigan State website at Rivals.com. And we're going, I think, without phone calls today, just going to go mailbag style. And we've asked Michigan State fans over at the Underground Bunker message board to post questions if they had any questions that we would field them here during Spartan Mag Live. And the questions that we will field were posted at the Underground Bunker message board. That's the preeminent message board for Michigan State fans anywhere in the country, anywhere on the internet, anywhere in the cyber, what they used to call it. So, remember when the internet first came out? Yeah, I'm that old. It was called the Information Super Highway, the World Wide Web. Nobody calls it that anymore. But anyway, a lot of astute fans over there, a lot of astute observers. We try to provide some news and also analysis, commentary, a place for Michigan State fans to congregate, talk Michigan State sports among friends, mostly friends. A couple of frenemies in there. We try to keep that in good working order. Sometimes we have to show people to the penalty box. Sometimes we have to play recess attendant, separate people, tell them to go and stand with their nose against the wall a little bit. Sometimes I've got to go stand with my nose against the wall a little bit. And with this nose, I can get about 3 feet away from the wall. But anyway, hey, we've got about 10 or 12 questions that were posted at the Underground Bunker message board. I will be answering those questions. We take some questions over in the chat area also. Feel free to post over there. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know if you have any further questions or follow-ups that you want to get to. Michigan State with a big win, 70-64 over Michigan on Sunday actually. Had to have it. Clutch performances. Aaron Henry once again down the stretch with 2 or 3 big field goals down the stretch. And, of course, Joshua Langford with that three-pointer from the right wing. Biggest three-pointer of his career, fitting for him. So now the thing is, playing Maryland on Thursday, Tom Izzo had a press conference today. Michigan State's going to try to improve upon how they played against Maryland last time out. Maryland beat Michigan State 73-55, February 28th, down in Maryland. And Maryland's a pretty good team, and that win really put Maryland comfortably into the bracket, but they've not been playing good basketball since then. Meanwhile, Michigan State rallied from there, beat Indiana, lost to Michigan, then they beat Michigan. But the Maryland game, I said it going into that game that was going to be a strange one. The Illinois and the Ohio State games were going to be difficult. I thought Michigan State would rise up and had a puncher's chance in those games. We talked about that a week ago Sunday. It's the last time we had a SpartanMag Live. And there was reason to watch Michigan State coming out of the first game against Indiana because they were starting to get a little bit of traction in that Indiana game. First time they had gone small. They were doing some different things. But most importantly, it was the month of March, and it was Tom Mother freaking Izzo. That's what I told you here a week and a half ago. Tom Mother freaking Izzo is the reason that it all got stirred together properly. Now, yeah, Aaron Henry, Joshua Langford, all kinds of heart. They got it done. But Izzo pushing the buttons, pulling the levers. And it takes 30 games to get your crap together. Michigan State's played 26. Didn't get 30 games. But that's usually how long it takes to get the thing done, to get the lasagna done, to get the stew done. They've done it before. I've compared this season a few times to the 2003 season. And that 2003 season, that was the year after Marcus Taylor went pro. So they didn't have Marcus Taylor, surprise to them. They had freshmen, Chris Hill, Alan Anderson, Kelvin Torbert, short bench, struggled. Began the season 1-4 in the Big Ten. This team has more experience, but similar problems in terms of trying to find a point guard. That team was 1-4. I think they were. I wrote about this before and mentioned it. I think they were 10-9 on February 23rd when they played. February 23rd when they played Syracuse. When Carmelo Anthony came to the Breslin Center. Don Strait. Thanks, Don Strait. Where's the horn at? There it is. Don Strait, thanks a lot. Really appreciate your support. SpartanMag Live and SpartanMag.com. Thanks, Don. Really appreciate that. February 23rd, 2003, Michigan State played Carmelo Anthony, the eventual national champions. Came to the Breslin Center. Went back and forth, I think overtime, 76-75. Chris Hill, as a sophomore, set a Michigan State record for made three-pointers. I think Bryn Forbes broke that record a little bit later. But anyway, that was the day Izzo moved Alan Anderson to point guard. That late into the season. February 23rd. At that time, they were negative bubble, Michigan State was. Played well that day, lost. From that point on, Michigan State was good. Beat the defending national champion Maryland Terrapins in the Sweet 16. Went to the Elite Eight. Played Texas, San Antonio, down in Texas, down in the Alamo Dome in San Antonio. Texas was good. Texas more physical than Michigan State that day. Squeaked by them. Texas went to the Final Four. Michigan State almost went to the Final Four. For a team that began the season 1-4 in the Big Ten, and they were like 10-9. Then he makes a move. Izzo at point guard, Alan Anderson to the point. That late, February 23rd. Well, February 23rd, 2021 was the exact date that Michigan State beat Illinois. And they looked like a different team that day. Illinois is great. Michigan State played hard. Brad Underwood, head coach at Illinois, cranky. Saying Michigan State mucked it up, made it ugly. Crying Illini. The Crying Illini, they're good. But they were the Crying Illini that day. Michigan State was good that day. They were good. Physical, communication on defense, hedge help recovery, tied together defensively, playing some of that Final Four defense. It started to show itself that day, February 23rd. It's not too late when you get to February 23rd to change your stripes a little bit. See 2003. See 2021. That team in 03, 1-4 in the Big Ten, negative bubble late in November, late in February. That close to the Final Four. That close. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying if you shut the door on anything with Tom Mother freaking Izzo involved, I said freaking. That's the last time I'll do that. But it's interesting. I know you guys are fired up about it, but it's an interesting phenomenon. Is that the right word? I don't know if it's a phenomenon, but Hall of Fame coach getting it done. Of course, the players have to play, but Izzo irons it out, irons out the wrinkles, and gets the proper the proper attention to detail, accountability, quality control. And I mentioned in the .comp article also on Monday morning, hey, when Rocket Watts didn't dive on the floor for that loose ball, extra pass, kick out, 3-pointer, 7-point lead goes to 10 points, 17 minutes to go in the Michigan game, and Michigan State having played 6 games in 13 days, they didn't have any fuel left to come back again. They'd come back twice in that game, playing on 1 day's rest, over. Didn't get on the court to dive for the loose ball. Now, did he not dive because it was 6 games in 13 days? It gets a little tired and you talk yourself out of it, diving on the floor to get that one. Well, he came out and did not play the last 17 minutes of the game. A clear message. It's got to be done a certain way. Lost that game, got ugly from that point on. But when they played Michigan again, it was clear which team top to bottom was going after loose balls and rebounds and deflections. And it was Michigan State. Michigan State was more motivated for good reason. Michigan, not as much motivation. That was the edge Michigan State had that day, and they rode it hard. It's not like Michigan State shot the lights out that day. Now, Watts did. Hauser played pretty well. But it's not like Michigan State played out of their gourd. But the staples, the brass tacks, they were back. But they're back for a team that is also communicating better on defense. The hedge help recovery defense on ball screens against Michigan was outstanding. Marcus Bingham playing help defense, ball screens better and better all the time. He improves every week now. He's getting to that point where he's improving all the time. I talked about that in the VCast after the game at Breslin Center on Sunday. Bingham is playing better all the time. Watts, can he sustain that? Can he harness that? I'm not sure. But Joshua Langford, ladies and gentlemen, the 2 best back-to-back games he's ever played, in my opinion, the win at Indiana and then the Illinois game. Back-to-back, Joshua Langford, the 2 best games he's ever played. Not like he had the biggest numbers ever, but what do you have, like 16 rebounds against Illinois? Outstanding. And just grindstone. And not as efficient against Ohio State, but he had a blocked shot at the end. Maybe could have been called, I'm not sure. Not as good efficiency-wise against Michigan, but he had the big 3-pointer late. And I think it was the Indiana game when Izzo was asking Langford, what's going on? And Langford's like, I can barely walk. His legs were spent. So now, you guys know about Josh Langford. Missed almost 2 years. Came back. Eased him into the playing group. Had a lot of rustiness. And then started getting a little bit better. December, January, getting his legs under him. And then boom, went down for 3 weeks with COVID. Came back. And they had to play him for 30 minutes a game, 32 minutes a game, 34 minutes a game, getting blown out against Rutgers, blown out against Purdue, somebody else. But he had to play 34 minutes. Gabe Brown was not back yet. He was out with COVID. So even though Langford didn't have his legs back then, they made him play 34 minutes. Izzo apologized about it, but it was what it was. Then he started to catch his legs a little bit better, evened out, had another day's rest against Illinois, and boom, played a great game against Illinois, 16 rebounds. Then he maxes out against Ohio State, struggled against Maryland, struggled in some ways against Michigan twice. Now, today, Josh Langford did not practice. Izzo held him out. He wanted to practice, Izzo held him out, trying to recharge him. Here's my point. As they head toward the Big Ten tournament, what kind of Joshua Langford do they get? Do they get that guy that played against Illinois and Indiana? I think that's a possibility. He's got a full season in now. The fuel gauge has been recharged a little bit. The pressure's off. I think you could get a real good Joshua Langford right now. Aaron Henry, like Izzo said, Aaron was practicing today. As Izzo said, strong as an ox, no problem. And, Conan Dyke and I talked about this in the VCast a couple times. I'm not sure it projects as well on television as it does if you see him play live. When you see Aaron Henry play live right now, when he drives, gets into the lane, defenders are trying to be physical with him, and they're bouncing off this guy. He's got big legs, strong at 6'6" or 6'5", whatever he is. Strong. They're bouncing off of him. Now he gets recharged a little bit. Hit a big 3-pointer late, getting in the lane, taking over, and all these games coming down the stretch. Now you might see his wheels a little quicker. You might see his shooting percentage improve a little bit. Izzo says they want to get back to running the run game, transition game. It's not been part of this team all year. Can they incorporate that? That's something that can help Rocket Watts. He can do that. But running is one thing, but making those passes in transition. There's a feel for that. And that's where Cassius Winston was so great. Winston was not a great straight line speed guy, but the way he could advance the ball right now at a glimpse was the best they've ever had, next to number 33. So what kind of Langford do you get now? Could be pretty good. Hauser looked better. Bingham's getting better all the time. And the point I made in the VCast is this is another Izzo staple. It's something that happens, and it might be happening now. For whatever reason, young players, freshmen, sophomores, sometimes they come on strong late, like from March 1st on. There's a number of examples. I like to talk about Erasm Lorbeck back in 2003. No, it was, what year was that? That was the year, it's 2003. When they beat Maryland, they beat Florida in the second round, blew them out down in St. Petersburg, Tampa. Lorbeck, Davis, and Ager as freshmen all rose up late in that year. I've talked about Draymond Green. Everybody remembers how great he was, All-American, all that stuff. When he's a sophomore, he was coming off the bench, not playing a lot of minutes in the first quarter of the season, a little bit more midway through the season. Came off the bench in 2009 as a sophomore. Helped that team beat number 1 seed Louisville in the regional finals. Corey Lucius came on strong late his freshman year. There have been others. So now, Bingham, he still seems young. He's a junior. But Watts is a sophomore. Can he find a nice level of consistency there? If they do and those things happen, depending on the draw, this team could do things like the 03 team. We'll see. Next time we see him out Friday against Maryland, it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. Let's go over here to the mailbag. We talk a little bit more about that game, that matchup a little bit later. We'll go to the mailbag from, these are questions posted over the Underground Bunker message board, specifically for SpartanMag Live. We appreciate everybody contributing questions, contributing comments over in the chat area. It's good to have you here on a Tuesday night in East Lansing. Question number 1, Matt from Bloomfield, Michigan says, are there any plans to fill or modify the basketball roster next year outside of the incoming recruits? That's it. It's a good question. Good question. Got 3 incoming recruits coming in. Maybe another one with Amani Bates. So where's the room? Joshua Langford. And the Langford thing, guys, I wrote that story a couple days ago, when Izzo mentioned that Langford, there's a chance that they could explore him coming back next year, because this year does not count against your eligibility if you do not want it to. So technically he could come back next year. Sounds like Izzo's interested in it. Langford didn't say yes or no. He seems interested. Langford's such a spiritual guy. He'll wait and wait and wait till he gets the proper sign and the proper mood and all those things like he did this year. Decided late to come back. He could decide to come back next year. So I wrote that if he came back, he would count toward one of the 13 scholarships. I've asked 2 Michigan State officials, and one of them thought that he wouldn't, and one of them thought that he would. I was corrected by some people that know a lot about Michigan State basketball over at the Final Forum, so I edited the story, but I still haven't gotten a straight answer from Michigan State people. Strange rule, you go to the NCAA websites, and they don't really spell it out. They say, yeah, you can come back, but then they don't say if it counts against your 13. It was my understanding that in football, you can have a senior come back, but it counts against your 85. Currently in college baseball, it does not count against your maximum. You can bring spring sport athletes back from last year. It's just on you to pay for them. So honestly, I still don't have a straight answer on that one. And I looked into it. Still don't know for sure. But yeah, if Bates steps in, then there'll have to be some roster attrition in some ways. I'm expecting Aaron Henry to go pro. Is it a possibility that someone like a Kithier or a Foster Lawyer could transfer out? You never know who's grumbling about playing time midway through the year. I mean, some of those guys have had some ups and downs. Watts, Brown, Bingham. You never know on those things. But right now, if Langford comes back, I think someone might have to move on. I don't know what would happen. Don't know. I don't know officially, and if they've been talking about it, it's not like I would find out about it anyway. Sometimes we do become privy to that information, but on this one, nothing right now. And the last thing they want is to be talking about those things behind closed doors and rocking any kind of ship that they have right now, because the ship is pretty smooth all of a sudden right now. Sand P. Carl from Parts Unknown says, Jim, what's the most recent MSU player recruit to have a nickname as good as Big Dooley? Big Dooley. If you don't know who Big Dooley is, he's a Michigan State football commitment from Conyers, Georgia. Big offensive lineman, 6'5", 335. His name is Christian Phillips. 3-star from Conyers, Georgia. Nickname is Big Dooley. That's what he calls himself on Twitter. That's what he calls himself any damn time he pleases. Anytime he damn well pleases. And there was some video going on of Big Dooley from the weekend, some workouts down in Georgia, where he was playing tug of war against two guys, and they were on the ground, and he was pulling them across the ground. That was all good fun, good fun. I'm going to throw that question out to the masses, to the people here at Spartan Mag Live. You tell me, when's the last time a Michigan State recruit, as Sand P. Carl said, has had a nickname as good as Big Dooley? You guys let me know in the chat area. Question number 3, Spartan MD from West Bloomfield, Michigan. He wants to know about Dylan Tatum from West Bloomfield High School. Any updates? Let me see here. I was just asking around a little bit. Nothing. Okay, I just asked Jason Kilp about it, because I think Jason was going to ask Dylan Tatum about it last weekend at a 7-on-7 tournament that took place in Brighton. I was going to go, but the people in that recruiting class, they weren't playing until like 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, midnight. So I didn't go. My nephew had a birthday party. He's 15. He's older. It's an older type of party. See my brother-in-law, some of those people hadn't been out, seen those guys in a while for reasons. And I didn't go. Also, I was going to watch Jaden Mangum play in the 7-on-7 tournament on Saturday, but he was held out. Had a little bit of a back injury. So he'll be playing later in the spring. So those guys weren't there. Didn't match up with my schedule. I kind of wanted to go to see Tatum. Jason Kilp was going to ask him. I'm not sure if he got a chance to ask him or not. Basically, everything's looking like the Michigan Wolverines for Tatum. His high school coach, everybody knows Bellamy. Ronald Bellamy is now DB's coach at Michigan. Michigan's recruiting Tatum as a defensive back, so his former high school coach would be his position coach at Michigan. Michigan State was the leader for Tatum. He's got his top 4 out. If he didn't already announce it, it's going to be coming out real soon. But anyway, the update is, that's going to, Michigan's going to be really hard to beat there. Really hard to beat. So no updates there. I don't see, I'm not sure that would change a whole lot unless there's some coaching changes this fall, which is possible. Would coaching changes happen before signing day in December? Possible. I don't know. Also, he asks, what about the linebacker? I don't know what that says. Let me go. He says, any chance Boachi, talking about basketball. Oh, he says, what about the linebacker Lance Dixon from West Bloomfield, originally going from Penn State, about him transferring to Michigan State. Michigan State was interested. He was interested, but Michigan State's kind of backed off on that a little bit now. Michigan State feels like they're in good position with another linebacker. So I think that's where that one stands right now. I think Dixon's going to end up elsewhere, and I think Michigan State's going to end up with a different linebacker. He says, any chance Boachi, the center from Canada, recommits to Michigan State? He says Michigan State's bigs are not very big. Opposing centers make Michigan State's bigs look like little kids. Boachi, well, no, I don't. If he decommitted from Michigan State, when you do that, you're pretty sure that you want to go somewhere else. Once in a while, you'll see somebody decommit from a school and end up back at that school. I'm not anticipating that. I think Michigan State hangs on to Bingham, Sissoko, and Marble. With Marble, with his father passing away, you never know. You don't know what's going on there either. He's been starting lately and doing a solid job. But going back home, I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on that. But, hey, Sissoko, when, he got in against, was it Michigan or Ohio State? One of those games, came in and just gave great effort. And Izzo loves him as a kid. And when he defensive rebounds, it's a thing of beauty. Now, he played some ball screen defense against Indiana that wasn't so good. He got out on the point guard and just gave ground, all the way to the dotted line. The guy pulled up a jumper, and you could hear Izzo, Monty! Because there's no crowd noise except for that fake crowd noise buzz thing they got going on. Izzo's like, Monty! In other words, Monty, you're doing it wrong. Took him out. Film room. Next game, not as bad, but just a simple thing like ball screen defense. He was just like giving ground. No, you got to, build a wall. You are a wall. Set a wall. Your feet are there. And he moves his feet well. Still learning. But, Boakye's pretty good. I've not seen him play in a long time. Nobody plays, right? But just because someone's ranked high and you've not seen him play, don't fall into the trap of the unknown is undefeated. Just because someone's ranked high. Oh, he's number X ranked center. He might end up being really good. I don't know. But Sissoko was ranked pretty high too. So was Bingham. When they get here, you saw they had work to do, right? Wherever Boakye goes, he's going to have work to do too. Dickinson at Michigan didn't have as much work to do. Good player coming in, impact player. Not a lot of guys like that roaming the earth that can come in at 7-1 and go straight to college and be an impact player that early. So Boakye's good. When they got him, I'm like, man, where's he going to fit? They got all these big men. I wasn't sure where he was going to fit if he reclassified. So if he wants to reclassify, Michigan State's probably not the place for him, even though he wanted to play with Bates. But no, I don't see that one coming around. But you're talking about opposing centers making Michigan State look like little kids. True, but, Dickinson, they did a pretty good job on him in this last game. And it was interesting with about 10, 12 minutes to go, Michigan tried to just straight post him up rather than doing the ball screen rolls with him, which is their main mode of operation. They just tried to straight post him up. And Michigan State, I thought, bashed him pretty good. Stood their ground. He got a couple of shots down in there, didn't hit them. I thought early in the game they called that foul on Marble, which was not a good call. Marble's standing his ground, and Dickinson's trying to back him down, get possession, get position. They're hitting each other like a couple of big horn sheep in the Rocky Mountains, and they call a foul on the defense. I know it's a different officiating crew, but earlier in the week on Tuesday, when Livers was backing people down, they were calling it on the defense twice. I think once on Aaron Henry, and I can't remember who the other one was, but they looked to the bench to Izzo like, what am I supposed to do? I'm here. I've got one arm contact. They're backing me down. I'm standing my ground. They called me for a foul. Sunday, it was on Marble. And Izzo went back crap on that one. Back crap angry about that call. And went to a TV timeout, and he was back crap angry after that. And for the rest of the day, Michigan State got some favorable calls, just a little bit here and there. Juwan Howard was not happy about it. Free throws ended up Michigan State shot more free throws, but Michigan State also committed more fouls, if I'm not mistaken, which is rare for that to happen. You commit more fouls, but you end up shooting more free throws than the opponent. Not sure how that worked out. But, and going into that game, I said, that like Big Moobie at the Final Four and predicted that Rocket Watts was going to have a big game. And we'd been saying earlier in the week that Michigan, with their ball screen defense, they vacated a little bit. And if you get a good ball screen, the point guard can pull up from 16 feet, 15 feet. And Izzo and Michigan State's coaches were drilling that into the mind of Rocket Watts. You're going to have some areas here. You're going to have some windows, something we talked about in the Final Four message board. And yes, those windows were open, and Rocket Watts capitalized. Needed to have that, right? And also needed Michigan to not quite be as intense after winning the championship. It happens. Sports psychology. It happens. And we talked about that at the VCast, the audio VCast I had with Nils Deco as my guest after the Indiana game, the one in Bloomington 2 weeks ago. Looking ahead to the next 6 games, I thought there's a chance Michigan State could split against Michigan. Michigan looked great at that time, 2.5 weeks ago. But he and I both thought Michigan State had a chance to beat Michigan. He liked the matchups better than I did, but I liked Michigan State's chances just based on sports psychology. It's so hard to sweep a team in basketball. We've seen that in some of the other conferences, like Mountain West, where they've played a lot of 2 games at one site. It's been really hard to beat a team twice. In this case, rivalry game, maybe Michigan State would be up a little bit more. Maybe Michigan would remain up because of a rivalry game. But I'm not sure these two teams hate each other right now. When Beeline was there was a lot of respect between Izzo and Beeline, but the players didn't hate each other personally, but they really, really wanted to beat each other badly. I'm not sure that exists right now between Michigan and Michigan State. I think it does for Michigan State. But with Michigan, when you have a point guard like Brown, or like Smith, and then Brown coming off the bench, and Dickinson being a freshman, 3 of the top 6 players are brand new to the rivalry. So, Livers was trying to get them heated up and all those things, but it's just not quite, when you have, and those guys are all out-of-state guys, when you're bringing them from far away in year number 1, you can tell them it's a rivalry, but they don't really, it's hard to get it in year number 1. So I'm not sure that, so there's not the animosity that you might have in other years. So I thought Michigan State had a chance to win game number 2 just because it's hard to sweep. And in this case, Michigan had already won the championship, and I wrote that going into the rematch that Michigan State would need the point guard to make some shots. You need Michigan to get caught watching the paint dry a little bit in their championship banner, and also might need a few calls. Michigan got the calls on Tuesday night. They did. They got the calls. When Michigan State beat Ohio State the week before, Michigan State got the calls against Ohio State. They did. Underwood's still complaining about the Michigan State-Illinois game. I don't know about that. When Michigan State lost to Purdue at Breslin Center back in January, Purdue got the calls. It's a difficult sport to officiate. I'm not saying it was fishy. I'm not saying there was any conspiracy. I'm just saying it's a darn hard, impossible game to officiate consistently. And sometimes it inadvertently tilts toward one team. It's a great sport, but it's a screwed up sport in that regard. There's not much you can do about it. There's just a random nature to basketball with that. And that random nature of the dice needed to come up Michigan State's favor to beat Michigan. And it did. Now, as it turned out, Michigan State was up 11, and they're real close to putting that thing to 13 a couple of times. Michigan made a comeback, cut it to 2 in the last 2 minutes. But Michigan State controlled most of that game. It was close. It was competitive. But it wasn't like Michigan State needed to play perfectly to win that game, as it turned out. Anyway, how did I get talking about that? Question number 4, and then we'll go over here to the chat area. Michigan State Pat from Atlanta says, Jim, any word from some of your contacts or anyone or are any players standing out in the workouts, Michigan State football winter workouts leading up to the spring game? Actually, leading up to spring practice, I think he meant to say. Also, I will answer that. And he mentions a couple players here. I am hearing some things. And I tell you what, the quarterback from Temple, Russo, I'm hearing good things about him. He's liking being here. He's got that, he's got some personality. Big, thick guy, personality. And, everybody knows he's got tools. And they're showing themselves in the indoor, the optional workouts that are going on. Throwing the ball around. I hear Russo is looking good. The offensive tackle from Arkansas State, Jarrett Horst, looking good. I hear Hampton Faye's doing well. But Russo, he's just motivated, energetic. He's excited to be at Michigan State. He's excited to be here. And you saw that when there was that photo op, that video thing, when they, some of the new players put the jerseys on for the first time. You saw Russo hold up his number. And if you saw the video, Russo looked at it. And he just looking at that jersey admiringly. Temple's good, did a good job there, but you don't need a pair of eyes to understand that this is a guy that always wanted the keys to the big rig. He wanted the keys to a big rig, the big car, big machine, a Big Ten team. Michigan State's it's a big rig. Some bells and whistles. Temple's had some good teams. Nothing against them. But now he's going to the big rig, and he's excited. And he's doing pretty good over here. I'm hearing good things about him. Jarrett Horst, same type of thing. Drew Jordan, the defensive end transfer from Duke, his sheer size has been a welcomed addition. Now, I look at that guy, and he's got size and stuff, but I still say, when I looked at him play against North Carolina, I went back and watched some of their tapes, and he was getting moved off the ball against double-team blocks a little too easily, especially for a big dude like that. So he's got to get more firm against double-team blocks. And if there is a green-white game, there will be. I'll be watching him, and how well he's able to withstand double team blocks. But that's some of what's going on over there. All right, let's go over here to the... Are my glasses crooked? Got to put my readers on. You guys make fun of me about that. Oh, it's never my best moment here, but I don't have good moments anymore. Let's go over here to the chat area. Angelo Gross, Harold Joyner enthusiast. Izzo, he says. Hayden Roberts says, go green from Lake Odessa. Lake Odessa. Hayden, I didn't know you're from Lake Odessa. One of these winters, we're going to have to go out in Lake Odessa and go ice fishing for some crappie, Hayden. You ever do any ice fishing out that way? I've never went ice fishing on Lake Odessa, but I think I saw ice fishing on Lake Odessa once on Michigan Out of Doors. Put that one on my bucket list a couple years from now. I got these kids in my house now, but in my older age, write that one down, Hayden. We're going to do that. John G. says, hi, Jim, from Mason, Michigan. Water on the menu. Good for you. It's good for you. Mr. Boneman says hello, comp. Hayden Roberts says, drinking Bell's Flamingo Fruit Fight. Not familiar with that. Is that a new one? Got to appreciate Bell's and all the good people in Kalamazoo. Jeff Blanche says, go green from Grand Rapids, drinking ice water. Good for you. Is that our starting five? We've got Angelo Gross, Harold Joyner enthusiast as the two guard. Hayden Roberts running the point. John G on the wing, Mr. Boneman, the stretch forward, Hayden Roberts, not Hayden Roberts. Jeff Blanche is in the middle. Jeff Blanche is in the middle. And he's a house down there. He's a house down there. That's his office down in the low block. That's his office. Jeff Blanche. It's a new acquisition. I think it's the first time Jeff Blanche has been in the starting five. Good to have him here from Grand Rapids. Rob South says, what's up, fellas? First man off the bench. Mr. Bowman drinking water also. It's Tuesday night, right? We're old. A lot of you guys are old. Not everybody is. But I got to give credit to my guy, Hayden Roberts, out in Lake Odessa, throwing back some bells. Good for you, Mr. Bowman. Tim Johnson says, go green from Portland, Oregon. Way to be, Timothy Johnson. Angelo Gross, Harold Joyner enthusiast says, comp, do we take a loss so we don't end up on the 9 line? If so, we would play Gonzaga or Illinois if we were a 9 or an 8. Well, they won't play Illinois because they won't, unless they can really avoid it, they don't like having teams from the same conference play each other in the second round. I know Michigan State played Minnesota in the second round at Des Moines, Iowa, the last time they were in the tournament 2 years ago. But for the most part, they want to avoid that. If the Big Ten gets 9 teams in, they won't be able to avoid it somewhere. But would they do that to a number 1 seed, to a top seed, a Big Ten number 1 seed? Would they put a Big Ten team in the 8-9 line? I think they might try to avoid it for a number 1 seed. You make an interesting point, though. Does Michigan State take a loss so they don't end up at the 9 line? I don't think they ever take a loss. They always try to win. Sometimes a loss is not a bad thing. I've never had Izzo admit that it's not a bad thing or that it could have helped him a time or two in past years, but they'll try to win. Now, if they win and they beat Michigan, then they're in the semifinals. You get that deep, you just kind of want to go ahead and win on Saturday. But I don't think it would be a bad thing for this team to win on Thursday against Maryland, beat Michigan on Friday, of course, lose on Saturday, go home, get ready for the tournament. The tournament starts a day later this year, doesn't it? It usually starts on Thursday. And you get Thursday, Saturdays, and then Friday, Sundays. Is it starting on Friday this year? I think I heard somebody say. I've not looked that far ahead, but that's a big deal if you get that extra day. So, the Sunday-Thursday turnaround is the thing that you try to avoid. You don't want to be maxing out, playing Friday, Saturday, Sunday, get home on Monday, get home late on Sunday, take Monday off or have a bad Monday practice, have a Tuesday practice, everybody's still tired. Then you travel on Wednesday, especially if you travel on Wednesday to go out west, which is not in the equation this year. And then you go get beat on Thursday. That's happened a few times. And those teams are really bad against the spread. Not going to happen this year. But teams that play a conference tournament game on Sunday, and if they get scheduled to play on Thursday, especially if they're changing time zones, or if they're in a plane for 3 hours, 4 hours, those teams Because a lot of times teams that win their conference tournament get it, they really get a lot of juice Vegas-wise, and the point spread gets fat. Then they lose on Thursday. Not as much of a deal this year because, like I'm saying, I think they're playing on Friday for the first game of the tournament. Someone can look that up for me. I think that's the case. But Michigan State being a lower seed and whatever they are in the Big Ten, a number 9 seed, having to play on Thursday rather than having Friday be your first game. So if Michigan State's going to go to the finals, that's 4 games in 4 days. Then you're right back where you started. They're rested now. They'll be rested for the weekend. But with their roster, and if they have to play, if they're playing Aaron Henry at the 4, which they didn't do at all in the second Michigan game. They did it in the first Michigan game and started to take control of the game late in the first half. With Henry at the 4, side ball screen, getting a 4-5 ball screen, getting a ball screen from a 5 for a 4. So that puts, like Livers and Austin Davis in a situation where they've got to play ball screen defense. It's easier to play ball screen defense if it's a center and a guard, just because they do it more often. Because usually you're setting a ball screen for a point guard. So Mike Smith and Austin Davis, they've played ball screen defense together a lot before. But when you have a 4 using the ball screen, Aaron Henry playing the 4, utilizing the ball screen. Now, who's guarding Aaron Henry? It's usually Livers. So now you have Livers and Davis trying to play ball screen defense, and it's a new construct. Dickinson was out with 2 fouls. I'm talking about the first game on Tuesday in Ann Arbor, late in the first half. Michigan State was starting to have a nice little run, side ball screen. Henry went in, scored one, went in, and another time Langford drew a foul, trying to come out to what was Langford doing? But Langford was setting a wedge screen for whoever Michigan State's big man was to go set the ball screen. So, because sometimes when you go to set a ball screen, they already know it, and they're a step ahead of you and trying to get to it. But if you set a wedge screen the screener type of situation, Langford goes and sets a screen for your screener to come out and set a screen for Henry. Well, Langford got plowed over, got fouled. He went to the free throw line. So even though they didn't get to the side ball screen action, still got to the free throw line. Henry scored once, went in, was fouled, but that's when he went up and elbowed the dude, got the flagrant, and went out. But that was off the side ball screen action. They'd done it like 3 or 4 times in a row. Michigan was having trouble with it. Henry had to sit. You know what happens from there. But in the rematch, I kept waiting for that to come up again, and they did a little bit of side ball screen with Henry as a 3, but not a 4. It's different. So they didn't do it much because Langford got in foul trouble. When Langford got in foul trouble, then Michigan State couldn't go small. They didn't have enough wings. So Michigan State in the second game didn't do what I think is usually their most effective lineup, which is Langford, Brown, Watts, and Henry, and then a big man. Didn't do that in the second game because of foul trouble to Langford. So if they play them again, might we see that again? Might Michigan have a problem with it? I don't know. Something to keep an eye on. But anyway, you're asking, does Michigan State take a loss so they don't end up on the 9 line? No, you don't do it on purpose at all. But you don't want to be an 8 or a 9 in the NCAA tournament. Because here, 2 weeks ago, if you're a Michigan State fan, you're just praying to get in and keep that streak alive. And the streak is a big deal. It's a big deal. For those of you that have not had streaks, you wouldn't understand it. If you're fans of other teams, aside from Kansas, Duke, North Carolina, you wouldn't understand. If you're a Michigan State fan, you understand. If you're a Michigan State player, you do, even though you're just been in the party for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Michigan State coaches, for sure, they understand it. But 2 weeks ago, you just want to get in the tournament. Just get in the tournament, right? Now that you're in the tournament, you've beaten some of these teams. You've beaten number 2 in the country, number 4 in the country, number 5 in the country. You got a coach who's hung up 7 or 8 Final Fours, banners, 2 or 3 more Elite 8s. And then you're thinking, well, geez, can we get out of the first weekend? Yes, Michigan State can win game number 1. Depends on who you draw. But in game 2, if you're playing a number 1 seed, you'd much rather play a number 2 seed. There's a big difference between number 1 seeds and number 2 seeds. Number 1 seeds, you're talking Gonzaga, Baylor. 2 seeds, they could be good, but 2 seeds, who are going to be the 2 seeds? Like Alabama? Alabama's dangerous with the way they play and everything. It's not Gonzaga, though. Your chances of getting to the second weekend and pulling an upset in the second round, if you play a number 2 seed rather than a 1 seed, are a lot higher. So I'd rather be a 10. Be a 10. Take on some 7, you know. It's like Clemson going to be a 7 or something. Yeah, play Clemson, sure. Beat Clemson, then you're in a one-day prep. And Izzo is the master of the one-day prep in March if you're not tired. Michigan State's had to play some one-day preps this year, dead tired. The game at Michigan, one-day prep. The game against Ohio State, one-day prep. Won that one on fumes. Not supposed to be one-day preps in the Big Ten regular season. Had to do it this year because of the accordion effect of the schedule because of COVID. Had to fit so many games in. Michigan State's done it. And like Izzo told the team after the game, you're battle tested. So there's some, what didn't kill them will make them stronger. Plus there's a feeling of confidence like, yeah, we can handle that. So Michigan State, if you're a 2, you don't want Michigan State to be the 10 in your bracket. Hey, they might lose to a 7, especially if the 7 is someone like where's someone like Loyola of Chicago going to be? I mean, they could be a 13, they could be a 10, I don't know. Porter Moser, a good coach. They're like 28-4 all of a sudden, beat Drake in the Missouri Valley. And the Missouri Valley teams, I said it when they played Bradley. Bradley did not have a good record, and Michigan State almost lost to Bradley in the first round. That's when Izzo went crazy on Aaron Henry that one game. Hey, Bradley, they came in with a bad record. I don't care what your record is. If you win the Missouri Valley Conference tournament, it's going to be a good team because Missouri Valley is good basketball. This year it's Loyola again, right? They beat Drake, right? Got that right? So, but your point to stay off the 8 or 9 line, that would be kind of crappy if Michigan State luck. If they like beat Maryland, lose to Michigan, then they're an 8 seed opposite of Gonzaga. That would be a damper on the party, wouldn't it? If you're a Michigan State fan, but that's Midnight Madness. That's how it shakes out. You never know. But yes, 10 is better than an 8. I'd rather be a 10 than an 8. Do you finagle that in your conference tournament to try to create that? No, because you don't know what they're gonna do with you anyway. But where do they? I mean, I don't know. I don't want to get too far ahead on that. Nice little run so far, says Mr. Bowman. John Ostrowski says, go white from Toluca, Mexico. John Ostrowski. Toluca, Mexico? Is that what that means? Good, John. Do tell. Tell us what you're doing down there. What's going on down there? Chris Trinum says, salutations from South Philadelphia, born and raised. I happen to know he wasn't born and raised in South Philadelphia, but Don Straight once again. You know, Don, when you do, what just happened? Is the air horn going off? Is it stuck? What about the bicycle horn? That's the one we want. Is that thing stuck? I think it's fine. Let me know if the horn is stuck. Let me go down here and check. What are the most recent ones? BYU's up on Gonzaga? Okay, it looks like I'm not getting... I just went to the most current posts just to see if there were any people telling me, McFly, the horn is stuck. Comparoni, McFly. Hello, because sometimes there's things going on and I'm kind of oblivious to it. On that note, I'm going to throw a tweet out here and let the riffraff know that this nonsense is taking place. It will take a second. Appreciate Don Straight and his support. Everybody's support. Everybody's showing up. Everybody behaving themselves, being good Spartans, being good people. You're always good people, right? Let me go ahead and tweet this. I am live right now via SpartanMag. Live. Check us out here. My man, Spartan MD, is like, Comparoni, dead air, it's not great, it's not great. Yeah, it'd be great to go to a station identification right there, but we're not really part of a station, so there's no station identification, you know what's going on. Also, hey, I wanted to mention also about football and what's going on with Michigan State and who's looking good. Hearing good things about Jalen Hunt, showing really nice commitment in the weight room. They're excited about that also. Gordon Tenona, odd that Langford comes back for his 6th year. It is odd. But it's like Izzo said, when they were making those decisions, he just wanted to come back and give it a try. And at times he's looked really good. Jumping-wise, elevation, he's jumping better than he has any time in his career. When he came back, it was like, okay, 1 year of college basketball, be a captain, call it a career. Now all of a sudden, if he comes back next year and it's not a COVID year, and he's not injured, and doesn't have this accordion effect season, could he come back and average 15 a game and really smooth out his skills? Now, he's not an NBA guy, but his type of game, could he become a guy that could go to Europe and be a pro over there? The season is short in Europe. You just play one game a week, and you can make some really good money over there. Charlie Bell did really well over there. So all of a sudden, that's into the equation. If you're Joshua Langford, can you set yourself up to get a good deal overseas if you play well next year and Izzo wants you? Plus, next year they're going to need some leadership with Henry moving on. Izzo sees that Gabe Brown is showing some good leadership here and there. Would it make continue things to be crowded? Yes, but if you can bring Langford back, do you? It's interesting. I mean, roster management, these coaches talk about roster management is a difficult thing. Scheduling is difficult. Recruiting is difficult. But roster management, trying to anticipate who's going to be back, where do they all fit, how many scholarships do you have, all those things, it's tough. Let's go back over here to the mailbag. Alex in Los Angeles says, Jim, are you still feeling good about the unnamed transfer? Yes, there's an unnamed transfer out there that Michigan State's going after. Solid chance. It looked like there was going to be a commitment last week, but things are on hold a little bit. I think the guy wants to come to campus and look around a little bit. But Michigan State's in solid shape there. Terrence from Oklahoma City says, hey, Comp, Terrence from Oklahoma City, how do you perceive President Stanley's plan to allow at least some fans for athletic events to impact football recruiting? How do you perceive his plan to allow fans? What impact do I think it'll have on football recruiting? He says, how important is it for Coach Mel Tucker to have campus visits as early in his tenure as possible? It is important, and it is still somewhat early in his tenure, but he's gone 12 months without on-campus visits. And that bump you get as a new coach, especially someone like him with his presence and his salesmanship, it's important for a new coach to be able to recruit that first year with a 0-0 record. Because that first year, sometimes you're usually rebuilding something. So sometimes that first year is not so great. So that first year, sometimes you don't have a great record, like Michigan State, 2-5, not a great record. 2 great wins against Northwestern and Michigan, but the record wasn't so great. Recruiting with that 0-0 record, Michigan State recruited pretty well last year. What were the top 35 class or whatever it was. Could it have been better if he would have been able to? Would it have been more highly ranked could it have moved the needle on 2 or 3 or 4 different players if they had been able to come on campus and really fall in love with things rather than just falling in love with an idea through a Zoom screen? I know every program is recruiting through a Zoom screen, but it's easier for a Penn State or a Michigan to recruit through a Zoom screen because they're somewhat established. The 0-0, some way to beat back that establishment type of situation is to press the flesh face-to-face in contact. Didn't get a chance to do that. Not in the fall, not in the winter, no junior days, now not in the spring. I think it's hurting. It's causing Michigan State to spin their wheels. It's causing Michigan State to, it's slowing of the initiation of the process. Some of these others, Penn State's still recruiting like Penn State. Ohio State, of course, is going to still recruit like Ohio State. Michigan's still recruiting like Michigan. Notre Dame is recruiting a little bit better now. They're still going to recruit like Notre Dame. If you're trying to rebuild something, man, you need to get out there and sell it. And Michigan State's not had a chance to do that. And I think Michigan State's been a cylinder down, a piston down because of that. How important is it? It's very important. How much does it help to at least allow some fans in? How does that impact football recruiting? I'm not sure if recruits are not allowed to watch games this fall, which I'm not sure that's going to be the case. I suspect they will be able to watch games because in the South, they're talking about letting full stadiums at Oklahoma and Texas A&M, places like that. I assume that that's going to happen down south. And I assume down south they're going to allow recruits to visit on the sideline. So if they allow it, the Big Ten's going to allow it. That's my guess on that. To have some fans in the fall, it'll help a little bit. But most importantly, just getting those recruits face-to-face contact with Mel Tucker will help his chances. I think he'll do well. He's been waiting to have a chance to do that, and I think he will do well. But if he has to wait longer after the season, if this season is just kind of a 500 season, then you get into season number 3, and then the negative recruiting starts coming in. You need to do that early and get that stuff going early and not had it, and it's hurt. CJ from South Philadelphia, I mean, they're still recruiting pretty well, but I think they've been down some octane because of it, because of all this. CJ from South Philadelphia says, I hope that you and your family are doing well. Thank you. He says, news just broke that Lepo is announcing on Friday. That's Ashton Lepo, offensive lineman from Grand Haven. He says, if Michigan State lands him, what is your opinion on him? In addition, is Kamari Landers still a take? Landers is an offensive lineman from Dearborn, Fordson. Yeah, Lepo is announcing on Friday his Final Four: Michigan State, Baylor, Indiana, Cincinnati. Kind of a late rising type of guy. If you could be a late riser as a junior, is that an oxymoron? He played at about 245 pounds this fall. He's added about 30 pounds since then, so he's a legit 275 in that area. 6'7". So 6'7", 240. If you watch his junior film, he was kind of lean. His legs were kind of thin, but he moves well. He wrestles. Got some tenacity. Got some athleticism. Good frame. I wrote in an article today that it reminds me a little bit of Cole Chewins. Cole Chewins was an interesting prospect, a gray shirt type of guy that was like a tight end at Clarkston. A guy that could really jump, but he was lean. Michigan State signed him, came in, looked good early. You know, he started early and was gradually adding weight. His career was curtailed by injuries, ended up having to retire early, but he was on pace to being a good offensive lineman. Lepo reminds me of that a little bit, except I think Chewins was he a basketball player? I know Clarkson has great basketball. I don't know if he played basketball or not, but Lepo is a wrestler, which coaches love. Mel Tucker loves that. You know, just bend his knees and leverage things and hand fighting, all those things with wrestling translates well to college football. And Tucker's a big believer in that. So I've also mentioned that he reminds me of some of the thinner type of guys that that Iowa has gotten over the years. Lean type of guys, maybe tight ends that become offensive tackles at Iowa. I think he's that type of an athlete. I hear good things about his balance. When I look at his junior film, the balance, I think you can work on that a little bit. But yeah, I think State's in good shape to get him. Grand Haven guy, grew up a Michigan State fan. Michigan State likes him. So it's not like you're getting a guy, it's not like you're beating, Notre Dame and Iowa and big time schools to get him. But he's an in-state guy. And so often we've seen some of these in-state players move on, leave the state and become excellent players, or stay in the state and become good offensive linemen in the MAC. Or Taylor Moton. Taylor Moton just became the franchise player for the Jaguars, $13 million a year. I remember seeing him over at the Michigan State camp. I was looking at some players, and I looked at that guy. I'm like, I tried to make a mental note. I'm like, what's wrong with that guy? But Michigan State was recruiting some other guys, whatever. Goes to Western Michigan, becomes great, becomes a draft pick. Now he's a franchise tag guy. And he camped at Michigan State. He's from Okemos. He was from 3 miles away from campus. Michigan State didn't offer him. Hindsight's always 20/20, and you only have so many scholarships, so you're going to miss. There's going to be misses. Would Lepo have become a miss if they'd let him get out of state and go to Indiana? I don't know. Do you offer a kid because you're worried about something like that? No. You got to do your thing. I think there was the kid from Saline that was offered by Vanderbilt. Michigan State looked at him, or Chelsea maybe. And Michigan State didn't offer. I can see that one, that they didn't offer. But Lepo, I mean, that's where coaches make their money, with the evaluation. And They like the frame. They like the tenacity, the nastiness. They like the wrestling background, the frame, the athleticism. Let me see if I can find this real quick. Oh, for crying out loud, where is this thing? Back in the old days, they made screens bigger on these things. All right. Couldn't find it. Anyway, where were we? We're talking about... So Landers, I'll be interested to see. I'll reach out to Kamari Landers to see if these things, loosen things up a little bit with him. He wanted to decide around Mother's Day, but, a lot of this is musical chairs. And if scholarships start getting eaten up a little bit, sometimes guys are motivated to go ahead and commit if they feel they know where they're going to go. But, if you get a commitment like Lepo, does that change who's a take and who's not in terms of other players on the list? I'll be looking into that a little bit more. There was the Corey Hendricks kid from Texas, announced his top 5 last week. He liked Michigan State, and Michigan State offered him earlier, but Michigan State, it was not a committable offer at that point. Now, if there had been camps this summer and he'd come to camp and done some great things, and maybe a scholarship offer had remained open in the fall and he looked improved in the fall, that's different. But someone who wants to make a commitment right now with what Michigan State already has as commitments on the offensive line and how many scholarship slots are left, Michigan State just was like, yeah, we're not going to take that commitment right now. So those are evaluations. It's like making draft decisions in the NFL. And these things can make or break a position room. And that's part of the sport of college football. And as years go by, we'll be able to evaluate Michigan State's evaluation skills. During the D'Antonio years, Michigan State's evaluation skills in the defensive backfield were great. Offensive line kind of went this way and that way. Hold on a second. Hey, Nils. I'm on the air right now. Want me to plug you in? All right, hold on. Nils Deco, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. I didn't even put the phone number on, but our colleague Nils Deco chiming in from Houston, Texas. I brought him into the show here because we always like to hear what he has to say because he's one of the more astute observers of Michigan State athletics in the history of Michigan State University. You heard me, in the history. Nils Deco.
Yeah.
Happy March, Nils Deco.
Hey, it's a good time. The sun is... the only thing that's bad about March is...
Now, you are on the air, so watch your language. You're on the air. Go ahead.
I'm saying the sun comes up way too early right now. I've had to adjust how I get up. You can't sleep in anymore. It's rough. But it's good. It's good down here. It's 75 degrees here in Houston, Texas. The best time of the year to watch more basketball than you know what to do with. Every channel. I was watching Bryant versus Mount St. Mary's. I'm not even gambling on the games. It was a pretty good game. Bryant ended up getting beat, but it's a guy, I can't remember the guy that was shooting 3-pointers, but it's pretty impressive.
Did Oakland end up winning that game against Northern Kentucky yesterday?
They won last night, but they got beat by the team that JUCO Advocate put together with Cleveland State. Trey Gomillion, who was the Defensive Player of the Year in the Horizon League, who good friend of mine. It's amazing to me, these kids that I've known through the JUCO ranks. Cleveland State brought in 5 or 6 JUCO kids in 2 years, and they end up winning the conference. They were the worst program in the league. Dennis Gates gets the job late after Dennis Felton gets fired for being a little too rough on his players. He was an assistant to Leonard Hamilton at Florida State and turns this program around in 2 years, and they're in the tournament. That's one guy that everyone needs to talk about. Leonard Hamilton, if you look at his history as a college basketball coach, one of the most underrated coaches out there. And, this is Dennis Gates. One of his assistants ends up turning around in Cleveland State in 2 years. He'll end up being at Penn State or Boston College, from what I'm hearing. He's heavy in the Boston College job because his wife just hires an assistant athletic director last year, I was told.
And what did the JUCO Advocate do for that process with Cleveland State?
Well, Dennis Gates was at our event 2 years ago.
All right, let me stop right there. Nils Deco is the founder of JUCO Advocate.
One of the founders. I was the one that gave us the name. Brandon Goebel does all the hard work. I just gave us the name. I'm good at names. Brandon did all the work. I mean, there's about 5 of us that were involved at the start, but Brandon Goebel's done all the work. He's an amazing dude, hardest working guy in show business. I came up with a name. We had an idea a long time ago, but Brandon's done all the work. I have nothing to do really with it. I mean, he does everything, and then I try to throw together some rankings. But we have this event in Melbourne, Florida, at the home of Eastern Florida State College, and we've done it for 2 years. We didn't get to do it last summer, but Trey Gomillion was like a throw-in. Jeff Dolan, who's a high school coach out in Colorado, a friend of Brandon's, and who's a real good guy, and said, hey, I like this kid. He's from Augusta, Georgia. I can't remember what junior college he's playing in South Carolina, but they find him. I mean, tough kid, just, gets after it, about 6'3", 205 pounds, ends up being, the defensive player of the year in the conference. And I mean, it's just amazing to me, these kids, if you give them a chance, give them opportunity, because everyone's, maturation rate is different, right? And so this is another kid. Everyone saw him play tonight against Oakland. I mean, the long-haired kid with a big ponytail, just competes. Competition is so much of it, but I'll go on my tangent because it has nothing to do with Michigan State. But, it's the best time of year. Watching this BYU Gonzaga game, BYU's up 13 points right now, at the end of the first half. Pretty good stuff. Mark Pope does a heck of a job.
All right, Nils, last time that you and I were on the air together, and I referenced this earlier in the show tonight, we did the VCast audio only, you and I, after Michigan State had beaten Indiana that night. And I used a little bit of foul language that day, a little bit of, PG-13 foul language. Because I
did too.
I was excited. Because it wasn't just a win against Indiana. It was the way Michigan State won. Going small, showing some things, but they were connected on defense. They were screening better. They were scrappy on defense. And we started mapping it out after that one in the last 6 games. What would Michigan State have to do to get into the tournament? And it was very unlikely at the time with what lie ahead. I thought they could possibly split against Illinois and Ohio State and split against Michigan. Get those 2 wins and then sweep the other 2 against Indiana and Maryland. I was worried about Maryland because that would be 3 games in 6 days and all of that. But it didn't turn out the other way. It turned out the other way. They swept Illinois and Ohio State. And I thought, I mentioned something about the chances of splitting those 2 games against Ohio State and Illinois. I said, how many wins does Michigan State get in those 2 games? And your quote was 1.5. You thought they could get 1.5 wins out of those 2 games. In other words, you were not eliminating the possibility of sweeping those 2 games against number 4 in the country and number 5 in the country, which seemed unthinkable at the time. Unthinkable unless you know Michigan State and Tom motherfreaking Izzo. I said I wasn't going to say that anymore, but I did. That's why Michigan State had a chance. That's why they were compelling. That's why we watched. That's why the astute observers, those that remain in the country for college basketball, that's why they were watching. The stupid people stopped watching Michigan State, and they may never learn, but came back, won those 2 games. I've talked about it before. I haven't gotten your thoughts about it on the record. Your thoughts about Michigan State and the way they've rallied. And right now, Lenardi has Michigan State as a lock in the NCAA tournament, regardless of what happens this weekend at the Big Ten tournament in Indianapolis. Your thoughts on the run Michigan State did in the last 7 games, going 5-2?
Well, it goes back to what you said the other day when we were talking about how they made the adjustment from Thursday to Sunday on the ball screen defense, right? The thing about Izzo is if he sees something one time, and I think his staff does an amazing job of making adjustments from DJ to Fife to Garland to Wojcik. Like, they see things, they make an adjustment on the fly better than anybody. And that's why it's always like what Izzo has said. It's like, get me through the first game, I'll get you through the second game.
Yeah.
Because they can see the adjustment needs to be made. There's nobody that does a better job in a small amount of time of changing the whole narrative. There's been no one better that's ever lived. You go back to every time we've had success on the way to the Final Four, and then you get to North Carolina, you end up losing because it's one of the best teams that ever played. You lose to North Carolina with Allen Anderson playing on one leg, you lose because Keith Appling has a broken wrist. But if there's an opportunity, like when they beat Louisville and Oklahoma that year in 2015 with Travis Trice going nuts, he's just different. There's a reason he's won all these games, and you can't ever doubt him until the whole thing's over and done with, because he ends up really basically 24 years in a row making the NCAA tournament. And like we've discussed, I mean, once Kansas goes on probation next year, Michigan State needs about 5 or 6 years to be the team that could make the longest run ever. And like you said, you get to that 31-32, that's hard to get to. I mean, it is. And I'm not saying Kansas is going on probation tomorrow, but, I mean, there's some factors this week's going to make it even worse. Like Kansas they're going to have a hard time making the tournament next year. I mean, I don't think Bill Self's going to be there. I don't think Jeff Long's going to be there. And we know Les Miles is going to be there, so it has nothing to do with Michigan State. But the things that have been done, he's one of the greatest who's ever lived at coaching basketball. And that's why
Kansas should not be in the tournament this year.
I mean, shouldn't.
Or last year. I don't know which year it should have happened. But, I mean,
they weren't going to do it, though, Jim, because here's the simple fact. They didn't get the money last year. It's the same reason they haven't judged on Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State has arguably the number 1 draft pick in the country, Cade Cunningham. He was an MVP. He was the most valuable player in the Big 12 this year. They can't afford for people not to watch every game. So the advertising dollars have to be better than they've ever been. So they're going to say, you know what? We're going to judge on this stuff on April 8th or 9th. Yeah, Kansas, Oklahoma State, South Carolina, Arizona. You guys are all on probation for the next 35 years, whatever it may be. But I'm just saying they're not judged on that right now. It's like right now, I bet you look at these ratings for ESPN right now. I mean, this is where the money's at. There's nobody in the stands, so every game is imperative for their bottom dollar. And that's what it's all based upon. We know that. So, but Tom Izzo is the best that ever lived in the Big Ten. I think he's had to make more adjustments than Bob Knight ever did. Now, Bob Knight won his title in 76, 81, and 87, but he didn't have to make the adjustments year to year like Tom Izzo's had to do.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas should have been out 2 years ago. Their streak should be 28, and Michigan State should be in the ballpark to go ahead of the field 5 years from now and have the longest ever. Now, I know Gonzaga's right on their tailpipe, and Gonzaga will overtake them at some point. But when you talk about major conference teams consecutive streak, it's different than doing it every year in the whatever West they're in. Are they in the Big West? Is that what they're in?
No, in the West Coast Conference.
West Coast Conference, whatever. Anyway, Michigan State against Maryland on Thursday, around noon, Indianapolis. They played earlier in the year. Maryland won 73-55. Michigan State, that was their third game in 6 days. Maryland had 6 days off. And the second half of that game was all about Michigan State hitting a wall. Now, that game, Julius Marble started that game. Izzo was still changing the lineup. And Izzo made an interesting comment after that game saying that Marble was dead tired. 2 minutes into that game. Starting was different. Starting was different for Marble at that point, and it kind of gassed him a little bit. Marble now is accustomed to starting, and he's a tactical starter. Bingham is their best center. Everybody can see that. But when you're playing against, Coburn and Dickinson at Michigan and some of these big guys,
you got to pick your spots.
Yeah, Michigan State's
doing a good job picking their spots.
Michigan State's doing a good job of starting Marble on Coburn and just hanging. Even though Coburn's a bigger guy, you have Marble just bash him and beat him and spend a lot of energy. Some of that that wrestling fatigue that can set in. But throw Marble out there, have him go just all out effort. But Marble knows he may only play 12, 13, 14 minutes. And if you know you're only playing 14 minutes, you can play harder in the post. So you're going out there against Coburn and Dickinson, and you're like bashing them on the block. So they're like, man, this is going to be tough today. So they bash back. Now you're getting them to spend energy, and you're getting them to spend it against Illinois. That's when Sissoko came in. First it was Marble banging on him. Then Sissoko came in, only played 5-6 minutes, whatever. But Sissoko was as energetic as he's been all year. I mean, moving his feet and hitting him and moving his feet with Coburn. And Coburn was getting fired up. And Coburn one time yelled real loud, and the Michigan State yelled back at him. But then, Coburn is like spending energy doing this, right? Then you put Bingham in. And Bingham's fresh as a daisy. You get better Bingham. You get better bang for your Bingham bucks if you bring him off the bench and have those other guys hanging on him early. You know what I'm saying?
It's like a battle royale, though. I mean, it's like a battle royale. Big John Studd coming in at the end. I mean, going back to the day. I mean, like you said, though, tag me in. And Sissoko is just so energetic, and that's when Coburn hit him in the back of the neck in that game. That should have been a flagrant foul. And then Sissoko, like 3 plays later, is when DeSomo gets hurt. And no one talked about that at all. I mean, my Illinois friends, they're really sensitive right now. They're like, they're in that spot where like, yeah, we're gonna win it all, and I'm having a feeling that Illinois is gonna lose the Elite Eight because that's what they are. They've always been that. That's what reason they never won a national title.
The Crying Illini?
Yeah, they're dirty. They're dirty. They've always been dirty, and they were always. I mean, going back to Mike White in football. I mean, they're just dirty. I mean, Lou Henson. Jimmy Collins. I mean, they're just dirty. So, and Brad Underwood's as dirty as it gets, and Teague was on your bench. So, I mean, we talk about our buddies down there in Ann Arbor being kind of shady and kind of gross. Illinois is as dirty as it gets because you don't get Coburn out of nowhere for free.
I don't know. I don't.
I know we're not supposed to talk about this out loud. We should only post this, right?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't have the facts on that. I don't know exactly what's going on there. But when you got, Coburn at 7 feet, 285, and Dickinson 7'1", 255, a question was posed earlier as to why Michigan State's big men look like children compared to these guys. You have to realize that Coburn at 7 foot, 285, and Dickinson at 7'1", 255, those guys are huge. It's not like every conference in America has 2 or 3 or 4 guys like that. You can play a lot of teams all over the country, and you're not going to be matching up against guys like that. True, Marble isn't as big as those guys. Even Sissoko's not as big as those guys. Even Bingham. But those guys make everybody's big men look small, except when Illinois plays against Michigan. So, the question was posed earlier, why do these other teams make our big men look like children? Boachi, Michigan State needs him. I'm not sure how tall Boachi is, but these guys would make Boachi look small also. So, Coburn and Dickinson. Does Dickinson come back next year? I'm not sure. Point is, you're not going to find a lot of these guys like Coburn and Dickinson size-wise around the country. It's not something – you need to have some size and play some post defense, but I don't think you overcorrect. I mean, Purdue has the one huge dude that comes off the bench, but there's just – I mean, Big Ten's just different that way. It's you don't change your roster. You have to have some size in your roster, but I think Michigan State has enough size. It's just – these 2 or 3 teams in the Big Ten kind of have circus size. But
they figured out their size. On Michigan State, like we said, though, you have Marble, Sissoko, and then Bingham, and then Bingham's able to use his length when those guys are tired from minute 8 to 0 in each half. He's a different player because those guys, they get more tired. It's like Nick Saban always said about defensive linemen. Once they get tired, you can't get their tank back.
And then if Bingham comes in, now Michigan has some depth with the big men because they bring in Austin Davis. These other teams maybe do, maybe don't. But you bash them with those guys, and then Bingham comes in fresh. And also Bingham is running transition down the middle of the lane to the rim, which Michigan State has not done much of this year, but that could be coming soon. Izzo said he wanted to do some of that. This is the time of year when they usually start to oil that up a little bit. Do they have that? Can Watts do it? Can he make those passes on the move? I don't know. I don't know if that part is smart for Michigan State to press the gas pedal on that with Watts. Maybe just bring him along, let well enough alone, but leave it alone and just go incrementally. Or does Izzo press the gas pedal and say, "Rocket, you can be a Rocket. We're running now." I don't know. I was not. The practice is not open these days, and if they were doing it, I wouldn't be able to tell you anyway. But can the transition game come back now, Nils? Can that be added to it?
I think they can pick their spots. I don't think they will do it, every possession, but I think they'll pick their spots. But in the Big Ten, you can never get out and run anyways because they realize what you're going to do. Everyone's going to get back because they don't want to, succumb themselves to the counter break. And I think the offensive rebounding has gotten better recently, though. That was something that wasn't good until that Indiana game. And it's gotten much better the last 5 or 6 games. I think you'll see the offensive rebounding continue to get better. It was much better in the last 4 or 5 games. I mean, it's been different. And they've gotten back to brass tacks, like you always talk about. Izzo's going to get them back to brass tacks. And offensive rebounding has always been, kind of the gold standard, getting that 40% of misses. And that's when you had the success going back to the Antonio Smith days in the late 90s.
That's part of it. And the defensive interior has really gotten better in recent games. And it had to. And that's why Thomas Kithier's not playing anymore. And he'll probably play a little bit if they make a run in the Big Ten tournament. But Kithier was good with ball screen defense. He was reliable and accountable. He knew where he needed to be and how they wanted each of their differing ball screen defensive schemes to be done. He knew how to do it. He could be relied upon to go out and do it correctly. Well, now, all of a sudden, Marble and Bingham can do it correctly. And if they can do it correctly, they're going to play. So that's why Kithier, at one point, those other guys couldn't be relied upon to do it correctly. That's why Kithier played. And Kithier set a standard, and those guys had to match it in order to exceed him in playing time. It was a healthy progression, so that's where they are now. Nils, are you having cereal?
No, I'm just getting something, a bottle of water. Sorry.
All right. So Michigan State versus Maryland, it was 73-55 back on February 28th. Marble started, played 4 minutes, got tired. He's got a better handle on that now. Here's the deal. Michigan State was tired. Where did it show itself? Aaron Henry, 4 out of 16 that day. Joshua Langford, 3 out of 13 that day. That's 7 out of 29 from those two players. Fatigue had a lot to do with it, but also Morcell. Morcell, the defensive player for Maryland, 6'6", has some size, very good defensive player. In terms of that 6'6" size, that weight class, so to speak, he might be the best defensive player in the Big Ten at that weight class. And it just so happens to match up with Aaron Henry. You know what I'm saying? Morcell is the kryptonite to Aaron Henry, possibly. This time, Aaron Henry it's not his third game in 6 days. This time, Morcell doesn't have 6 days to get ready. That was
Don't you think you post him up, though? Morcell's not 6'6". He's 6'4" and change. He's 6'4" and change. But you got to post him up. He's, on that, I don't know if you remember the critical mistake that A.J. Hoggard made. Michigan State, I think they were down 5 at the time. And they had a chance, and A.J. Hoggard went way too fast, and Morcell just cut him off, and then I think stole the basketball from him and went back the other way, and Michigan State was never in it again. That was like the biggest critical mistake Hoggard had made in that game because he went too fast, not understanding the situation, like, hey, let's slow it down. Let's see if we can get a bucket here. And I think Michigan State was down at 5 at the time. I can't remember exactly, but Morcell made that play, and he just took the ball away from Hoggard just because he's a man. I mean, not Hoggard, but Morcell's probably the most physical defender in the Big Ten. I think he's the best one.
He's listed at 6'5", 200. He's a senior. So, okay. I mean, Henry can do a lot of
great. Cut this off. I got a business call. Right. I apologize.
All right. Henry can do a lot of good things, but Morcell from Maryland is a decent matchup when you've got a defensive glove like that. There goes Nils Deco. Always glad to have him chiming in. So, the first game, Hauser at 11 points, 3 out of 6 from three-point range. But can Michigan State get more out of Henry and Langford? That'll be something, of course, that I think is possible. But Morcell gives you reason to think that maybe that variable will be a little bit different. The other reason that amplified the fact that Michigan State, when they played Maryland the first time, it was their third game in 6 days. Maryland hadn't played in 6 days. They'd been off since the previous Sunday. Okay, not only does that make Maryland fresh, not only does that make Michigan State worn out, especially after those 2 big wins, but here's the other thing. Maryland is a good defensive team. They'd held a string of teams like under 60 points. A well-coached team, defensive structure. You take a well-coached team that's already a good defensive team, and on Monday they have a day off after playing on Sunday. Tuesday they start working on whatever they're working on. They may not even get into the Saturday matchup until Wednesday and Thursday. 2 full days to get ready for Michigan State in practice. Film room, walkthroughs, and on the court. That's what Maryland was doing all week. Not only were they fresh, but in terms of a defensive plan for Michigan State, after Michigan State had just played Illinois and Ohio State, Maryland was able to use that time to come forward with a great defensive plan. And you may remember Michigan State early in that Maryland game was settling for 3-pointers. People are like, why are they settling for 3-pointers? Well, the shot clock's down to 4 because Maryland's playing great defense on everything that Michigan State's running. That's an impact. Not only were they fresh for 6 days, but they had all that extra preparation time. And they're already a good team, a well-coached team, and a good defensive team. And you ratchet all that up and amplify it, and you had really good defense for Maryland that day. And Henry and Langford had poor days. Now everything's equal. Now Michigan State can dive in deeper into the film and do the walkthroughs and get ready for what Maryland does. Now Michigan State can play some good defense on Maryland. And you're going to have a real good old-fashioned basketball game on Thursday in the Big Ten tournament around high noon. Let's go over here to the chat area, see what's going on. We've got Gordon Tonona says it's odd that, we already mentioned that one. Chris Trinum says that Syracuse game was tough. Excellent game by Chris Hill. Melo was just special during that freshman year. If you're just new joining the program right now, we're talking about, I mentioned earlier, 2003, the great season. the way Michigan State was able to turn the corner after having a bad season, starting 1-4 in the Big Ten. They were 10-9 midway through the year. I think they might have been 10-9 after they lost to Syracuse that day on February 23rd. February 23rd was the day Michigan State beat Illinois this year, and you can still make alterations if you're a Tom Izzo coach team, late season alterations that can shock the world and put a team back in the Elite Eight, which is what happened in 03. Chris Hill in the right wing making those shots against Syracuse, the Syracuse zone. What do you have, 7 3-pointers that day? School record that day. Chris Hill to the off guard. They were different from that point on. Chris Trynham says, yes, the 2003 season, you are hitting on tough memories from my freshman year. Lorbeck leaving still irks me to this day. Still bothers Izzo too, by the way. Lorbeck was a machine from 15 feet, Detroit Spartan says. And Lorbeck had a big pro career over in Europe too. I'm surprised he never quite gave NBA a shot, but he made plenty of money over there. Detroit Spartan says, I remember texting P. Diddy as soon as I heard Raz was not coming back. He was dumbfounded, blindsided. P. Diddy being Paul Davis. Raz. Is that what they call it? Erasm Lorbeck? Raz. All right. Can I swear here? All right. I'm going to swear to tell a story in a couple minutes because it involves Erasm Lorbeck. Erasm Lorbeck came to America from Croatia or Slovenia or Serbia. I can't remember which. I want to say Croatia. Anyway, 6'10", shooter, excellent player, long arms. So he didn't speak English when he came over here. So he still was barely speaking English, midway through the year, but he was learning some things as he went. And Alan Anderson and those guys, they taught him English, and they taught him some pretty good swear words here and there too, which is similar to Gordon Sutton when he was over at was he at Lansing Eastern High School? I should know. No, he was at Sexton. When he was at Sexton, I remember Sam Hosey did a story on that for us, the chairman for Spartan Magazine, and one of the insights that he had was that the guys over at Lansing Sexton had taught Sutton how to speak English, and they had programmed him with some colorful connotations and words as well, as they should. So Lorbeck's here, and he's being taught how to speak English stuff. By the end of the year, they're playing Florida, and Florida's number 2 seed. And at that time, Michigan State had an unspoken rivalry with Florida. They'd lost Anthony Roberson on the recruiting trail. And, Izzo was getting a lot of interference and heat from different angles, recruiting in the state of Michigan. Florida came up, got that guy, and they were doing some other things. And it was a tough deal. And, people were using things against Michigan State on the recruiting trail, like, oh, they walk it up, they play too slow. Well, 03, Michigan State gets in the tournament. All of a sudden, they're running with Alan Anderson as the new point guard, and they beat Colorado comfortably in the first game. Then they get Florida in the second round. Florida's the number 2 seed. They're playing in Florida. Michigan State came out and destroyed the Gators right there in front of their family and friends and God and everybody. Destroyed them. Mopped the floor with them. I mean, Florida fans were just quiet watching this go on. Michigan State had been to the Final Four in 99, 2000, 2001. They were one and done in 02. 03 wasn't looking so good, and all those haters and detractors, especially those in Southeast Michigan, were starting to look like they were starting to use that against Izzo and all this stuff. And then they turned it around, came back, and in round 2, they upset Florida on their way to the Elite Eight. This after Marcus Taylor had left. And Izzo was taking it on the chin from a lot of people, but bared down and gritted and showed all that grit, whatever you want to call it. Beat Florida, beat them soundly. Izzo won't admit it, but I know what he was thinking. He was mad. I might even verified it with him. I can't remember or not. But Michigan State was winning that game comfortably. And late in the game, it was like 65-36 or whatever it was. And people were using Michigan State's offense against them. And here at the NCAA tournament, Michigan State had a chance to hold Florida to 38 points. The State had the ball back. You go back and watch it. Lorbeck had it. I can't remember where he was, but the language barrier. And Izzo wanted to run some clock because he wanted to keep them under 40, just to stick it to them, just to stick it to them, stick it to everybody, stick it to everybody. And Lorbeck gets it, and he's open, and he shoots a 3, and he missed, and Izzo was irate. Florida comes down and scores, ends up with 40. Final score is like 64-40, something like that. And Lorbeck still wasn't sure whatever he was mad about. But, he shot, and I think he might have shot another one and made one later. And Michigan State triumphantly goes to the locker room, and I'm going to swear in a minute. And they go to the locker room, and they're all celebrating or whatever. And Brian Gregory told me that the coaches come into the locker room later, and they come into the locker room, and everybody's just rolling on the ground laughing in the locker room, just laughing, just laughing hysterically, laughing their you-know-what's off. And they're like, what happened? What happened? And to recreate it, Al Anderson's like, Lorbeck came in, and, he's got the broken language from Yugoslavia, the previous Yugoslavia. So he kind of has an accent like, because these guys have taught him how to talk, and he sounds like a hip-hop Dracula. And Lorbeck, he came in, and they're like, about the shot or whatever, and he had struggled to properly use foul language correctly. But on that day, about that three-pointer, he was like, oh, man, I thought I was going to airball that shit. And they just laughed their asses off because he finally got the swear word correct in his dialect, and they were just rolling on the floor laughing. And the coaches came in, they're like, what's going on in here? Lorbeck thought he was going to airball that mess. I don't know if that translates. I don't know if that humor translates to you guys. Maybe you had to be there, but that's the Lorbeck story from St. Petersburg Time Arena in Tampa, Florida in March of 2003. Oh, there you go. Detroit Spartan has in parentheses Paul Davis. Yes. Yeah, brutal decision to leave. Rob South says, Rocket is a sweet nickname. Get back to my challenge to you guys to tell me what's the best recruit nickname for a player Michigan State has had. Gordon Tonona, I think, has got the winner here. Bubba Smith. It's not bad. Chris Trinham says, that team would have been special with two 6'11" center power forwards that could post and shoot. You're right about that, Chris Trinham, when you talk about if Davis and Lorbeck stayed together. Because for the rest of his career, I know Davis played 3 more years, but they were never able to complement him with other big men. Delco Rowley tried, had some problems health-wise and stuff. Jason Andreas had problems with health-wise and food and everything. I think that was around the time that Adam Wolf was lost to career-ending injury. He wasn't like a big bruiser, but he was a stretch 4. They complimented him with Matt Trannon a little bit when he would join the team. But Davis was always having to worry about foul trouble because he had to play post defense against people. And if he got a second foul, he's coming out. He was just always having to worry about foul trouble. If Lorbeck had been able to complement Davis, Davis would have been a lot better, and those two would have been great. And Davis was always in the post, turnaround jumpers. I think one guy that could have been utilized differently was Paul Davis. I think that he had the ability to shoot off the dribble, 17 feet pull-up jumpers. I think he could have been a pick-and-pop 4 guy. Was never able really to do that, never really was able to attempt a lot of three-pointers, very few. He had the ability to face up and do that and be a stretch 4. Never had the chance to do it at Michigan State. If Lorbeck had stayed, they could have switched and swapped those roles back and forth and played together and been a twin tower combination with both of them able to shoot. Yeah, they could have been great. Detroit Spartan says he left for Europe fully intending to return to East Lansing, Michigan State. That's true. That's what Izzo thought. That was his impression. I think when Lorbeck left, I don't remember if his father was with him when they left, but they looked Izzo in the eye, and Izzo's like, now you're coming back, right? And they're like, yeah, we're coming back. And Razum thought he was coming back. No, he went over there. His father was a general manager for one of the European Premier League teams. Got over there, kept him over there, began his pro career, never came back. Razum Lorbeck's dad, and I can't argue with this, he always thought it was ridiculous that coaches like Izzo and his staff were unable to practice with players in the off-season. NCAA rules. You can't have... He was like, well, where's the player development here? I mean, he wanted him back in Europe with coaches all summer, which they could have done and sent him back over for a year, but I think that was part of it. They wanted more, they didn't want to have the restrictions, the NCAA restrictions on playing time. Detroit Spartan, he was a phenomenal football player back in the day. Talking about Mark Rocket Watts Sr. Still guessing it's Temple for Dixon, Chris Trinham says. All right, I'm going to go back over here to Actually, let me see. Let me see what are some of these other questions. I didn't get to very many of them because I've just been talking too much. I gotta find it. I gotta find my notes. Find my mailbag notes. Here it is. What do we have? Where were we? We talked about Lepo. All right. Hey, we talked about MSU Spartans 777 from New Hudson, Michigan, saying if Langford returns, how do the scholarship numbers work out with 3 recruits coming in, possibly in addition to Amani Bates? It seems like we would be 1 or 2 over. I mentioned it earlier. That's my understanding on the rule. I'll have to ask other people. I've asked people that should know, and they weren't quite sure. Izzo and those guys know, but I've not had a chance to talk to them about it. That's one thing we've lacked this year. Because we don't have press conferences where we're at Breslin, we're not able to watch practice. A lot of times after practice, you can rub elbows with the coaches and ask questions like that. Not really able to do it on Zoom because you have to wait in line, then you get one question, and you don't want to filibuster things because people have time, they have work to do. Question number 2, he says, do you know if Keon Coleman wants to or will play basketball? He definitely wants to, and the door is open, but he'll have to get here and work on some other things first. Macklin JB from Rochester, Michigan says, outside of Lepo, who do you believe is Michigan State's next commitment for the 2022 class? Landers has been on commitment watch for a while. Could this commitment, if Michigan State gets Lepo, could that push Landers over? It's possible. I'll put my ear to the ground a little bit more on that one. 08 is a guy's name from parts unknown. He says, any idea if the recruiting restrictions will be lifted this summer? We really could use a break in this area. No idea right now. It's right now it's a dead period until March 31st. So they'll look into possibly opening things up in June for, camps. They're leaving that door open a little bit, but right now, it's kind of hard to see that, but things are loosening up, and I don't know. I'll never say never, but yeah, they could use some visits. When they changed the official visit rules to allow official visits in June, that had the capacity to help Big Ten teams more than teams in any other program, any other conference. ACC and SEC did not want to change it. They did not want official visits to be allowed in the summer. So now, they had it for 3 or 4 years. It helped some teams up north. And then last year didn't have it. And then this year, if they don't have it again, that can hurt. But I don't know how those rules are going to be done and how they're going to be administered here this year. It's my first pandemic. I don't know. Getting close to turning the corner, though, aren't we? WX Spartan says, from the banks of the Saginaw River, he says, why don't these stories like Rush Prost and other SEC Pac-12 basketball violations get investigated more? It seems like everyone knows there's cheating, but nothing ever comes of it. Yeah, usually there's no paper trail, and there's no paper trail with the Rush Prost thing. We were talking about the Rush Prost thing on the Underground Bunker message board last night. He's a high school coach in Georgia. He was caught on tape talking about Alabama and Georgia and their recruiting improprieties and basically the cheating that they do. He said it, and Georgia says they're going to look into it, but they'll look into it and there won't be a paper trail, and they'll deem this guy to be not quite credible enough, and nothing will happen. If there's no paper trail, nothing happens. With the basketball teams, with the FBI probe, Arizona, Kansas, and the others, there was more than a paper trail. There were LSU's coach saying that, we made a strong-ass offer. Is that bad language? In my opinion, it is. And I think like 3 or 4 times today I've committed fouls. One more foul and I'm fouling out. Usually I don't swear. I don't like swearing on podcasts. I listen to other podcasts or Sirius XM and people are swearing and I think it sounds terrible. I think it sounds juvenile. I think it sounds unprofessional. I'm not always the most professional guy. I'm pretty casual. But I just think it sounds terrible. And we're not swearing. I did today to tell the Lorbeck story. And I did dance on that side with my Tom Izzo nickname for this year. And I quoted the LSU coach and the strong you-know-what offer, but I don't like to say even that word. And that word's a biblical word when you talk about donkeys, but I don't like to do it. When we first started doing podcasts, me and Konendijk, the original Skull Sessions way back, we were a little loose with the language back then. We were younger, we were edgy, we thought it was okay. But then I listened to it a couple times, and I was like, man, that's terrible. We're going to stop doing that. And I told Konendijk, he's like, dude, you swear more than I do. And I'm like, no, man, you swear more than I do. And he says, no, you do. I was like, no, you do. So for a couple years there, Konendijk would slip up and foul and swear, and he's like, oh, it's $1 in the cookie jar. Well, I never fined him, actually. But eventually broke that habit of Konendijk's, and I think I've broken it for the most part. Although I got a little bit excited after the Indiana basketball game 2 weeks ago when Nils Deco and I did the podcast after Michigan State beating Indiana, the comeback. And it wasn't a great thing that they beat Indiana, but you could see some of the machinery starting to come together and the gears. If you know Michigan State basketball enough, you could see it that day. You could see it. And that's why I called Nils. I said, Nils, we're doing a podcast tonight. And we're talking about this. And we're talking about their last 6 games and what they need to do because it is possible. Konendijk was up north on a ski trip. Everybody needs a little time off. Couldn't do a VCast with him, so I called Nils. I don't know if many of you listen to that podcast, but we broke it down that day. Came back here the next day on Sunday, the last SpartanMag Live. And if you were watching, it's a little bit different Jim Comparoni that day. Am I right? It's a little bit different. You know why? Because I saw the machinery the day before. The machinery, I saw it. I wasn't predicting anything, but I wasn't counting them out because of Tom motherfreaking Izzo. Because the machinery was coming together. And they still have further to go. Now you got the Watts thing coming in. Hauser, a little more spring to his step. A little more bushy-tailed in the last game. And I think we could see a different Langford. We could see a better, more efficient, deadlier Langford now. Now that he's broken through, gotten some rest, could see a better Langford. But anyway, with Rush Probst, the guy in Georgia, no paper trail. That's why they don't get investigated. Also, the NCAA is not really interested in investigating a whole lot. If the FBI is doing it for them, they'll listen to it and put a report together, but they don't have time for this. All right, another question about advantageous seating. We already went through that. Let's go over here to the chat area, then we're going to call it a day. Let's go through this, see what else we got. Who's the other linebacker that Michigan State will get if not Dixon? I don't know if they'll get him. I mean, people know about this Crouch guy at Tennessee. Michigan State's recruiting him. They're in on him. They got a shot, So that's in the ballpark. Crouch was a starting middle linebacker there. Former 4.5-star type of guy. Just played some inside, some outside. It's well documented that Michigan State's been interested in him. Other schools interested also. Chris Trinum says, patience, friends, patience. Chris Trinum says, Bo sucks as a ref, talking about Borowski. Hayden Roberts says, any news of possible grad assistants after the recent departures? No. Grad assistant hiring, that takes place, on a whole different channel. However, there is a certain former Michigan middle linebacker who used to be described as playing like a computer. Wouldn't be shocked if something happened on that front. Detroit Spartan says, I thought Rocket was done, his career over, with a wink. And being sarcastic, Angelo Gross, Harold Joyner enthusiast, says, what are the chances with the lethal transfer point guard from Auburn? Boy, I don't know. You're getting way ahead of me now. But those things come up in April and May. And last year, Michigan State made a run at Carlik Jones. Not sure if Michigan State went full blast. He's had a real good year at Louisville. I wonder how things might have been different if Michigan State had gotten him. I don't know. Rocket will average 20 plus in the Big Ten tournament, says Angelo Gross. I called it. 20 plus? The playoffs? Detroit Spartan says Rocket comes from a very tough environment in Detroit. There's a reason his mom has only seen him play one time in college, and he'll continue to grow, mature mentally. He says this year's been tough on him for sure. He has a bright future. Detroit Spartan is driving the Rocket Watts bandwagon. He's not just on the bandwagon, he's driving the bandwagon. I appreciate that. Detroit Spartan says, it'll be impossible to judge Russo until the green and white game at the earliest. True, but I'm hearing that he's impressing so far. Hayden Roberts says, yes. I don't know what that was for. Maybe Will Tiemann just saw someone hit a three-pointer. I don't know. Chris George says, hit us with some late-night PK tournament stories. Paul Konendijk, late-night tournament stories? Ooh, usually we're working. I mean, back in the old days before things got really competitive, I remember we went skiing out in Loveland, Colorado, back in the Drew Neitzel days when Michigan State beat Pittsburgh. We had a couple of interesting nights in St. Louis. Houston. No comment on Houston. Indianapolis, I think he and I were at the Steak and Shake at about 3 a.m. after something. No, that was Big Ten football tournament. Saw Digger Phelps in there at about 4 a.m. after the national championship. No, that was after the Wisconsin Final Four game, not the national championship. And after national championship, I loaded up with White Castle hamburgers and caught up with some friends after a little bit of time at the Slippery Noodle. At Final Four, usually we're working, but we'll be up late. But there's nothing. You always hear people say that. Well, I can't tell you that one. I can't tell you that one. I'm getting some of those. Nothing bad, but what happens in Spokane stays in Spokane. You know what I'm talking about? We're not that interesting. We're not that interesting. Great Lake, says Hayden Roberts. Great Lake. I don't know what's that about. Oh, you want the Great Lake rankings? We've not done that in a while, have we? Oh, Great Lake, you're talking about Lake Odessa. With the, they got crappie there, right? People go ice fishing for crappie in Lake Odessa. Doors Fan 91 says, just got home from our high school basketball game. Stevensville Lakeshore has a sophomore who can go. Division I kid. Stevensville Lakeshore, huh? Sophomore. Do tell. Talking guard, wing, positionless. I might know that if there'd been, like an Izzo camp last summer and an actual AAU season. But I got to tell you, there's a little bit of a blind spot right now with basketball recruiting because there was no offseason last year. And this spring, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, coaches have not been able to go watch high school players, so it's kind of hard to see who they're talking to. Plus, with the COVID situation and as busy as Izzo and these guys have been, they've not been able to come up for air a whole lot for things. I'm sure recruiting is still going on, but I got to get my ear to the ground on that and find out what's going on more with that. Hayden Roberts says, do you think that it's a bad idea to lose at the Big Ten tournament and take a bad seed at the NCAA tournament? We already talked about that. I mean, they would never lose on purpose. But if I had a choice right now, if they could, lose to Maryland and be assured of a number 10 seed, or if they beat Maryland and then beat Michigan and they become a number 8 seed, gosh, I don't know. It'd be kind of sweet to beat Michigan again if you're a Michigan State fan, right? That's an interesting hypothetical question for you guys. Would you rather win 2, including a win over Michigan, and go in as an 8 seed, which basically means you're not getting to the Sweet 16, very small chance to get to the Sweet 16, or would you rather be a 10 seed, lose to Maryland, and roll the dice because you get that you'd be trading a win over Michigan for a better chance to go to the Sweet 16. Honestly, I think that's kind of what's going on right now. Tom Kelly says, Izzo said at the presser today that the team is staying in Indianapolis after the Big Ten tournament, no matter how they do, just switching hotels. The powers that be want them to stay there and avoid travel due to COVID. It's a great point. They are going to be staying in Indianapolis. So winning and losing, getting home and getting rest is not part of the equation. You win, you lose, you stay there. So that's a difference also. There won't be any of that NCAA tournament travel. Interesting. Benchy says, how are they going to get all these games in the NCAA? That's another question. You have to wait and see on that one. Detroit Spartan says Sunday's win was big for the program on many levels. I would agree with that. Mr. Bowman says BYU has come to play tonight against the Zags up by 6. I know this is about an hour late on this. I don't know what the score is now. Let's see if I can find that. All you guys know, but I don't know. Gonzaga. Who are they playing? BYU? Some people thought BYU might give them a little something today. Looks like BYU's up by 4 with 11 minutes to go. I say that if you're gonna turn the TV on, make sure you stay here. Hayden Roberts says, you stay here and turn it on. But don't be leaving. We don't want you to leave. All the plants are going to die. Hayden Roberts says, Comp, have you tried online sports gambling? No, I've not. But, gambling to me, I've never liked gambling. I've never really been drawn to gambling. And I've said it before. I don't gamble because it's just too much of a gamble. And I don't do it because I just don't like losing, right? I mean, in Vegas a couple times, I was there for the Kentucky Derby once and did that once. And I think I bet on a NASCAR race once. But I've been to Vegas a lot, but I just don't. I encourage my friends to gamble, and I'll root like hell for them. I'll be happy for them when they win, but I ain't doing it. Gambling, nah. But I got to say that, but being bombarded, and I've bombarded with these commercials in the state of Michigan about gambling all the time. Hey, join this sports app, and all you have to do is bet that somebody is going to get wet at the swim meet in the SEC, and if they do get wet, you'll win $1,000. Just bet 100, you get 1,000, and we'll give you your first 1,000 to bet, or whatever they're saying. I mean, I'm like, well, damn, that sounds like a sure thing. I just downloaded the app and just bet that one time, and I'll be done. And I'll make like $100. That has crossed my mind. So they're trying to wear me down. And I understand that apparently with sports betting, it's gonna be good for the tax base. Is that right? Is that how that works? I'm a little worrisome about discretionary spending, what that does across the state of Michigan to people that normally would be spending that money at a restaurant or, at the mom and pop. I mean, mom and pops everywhere are just really getting hit. And I remember when they brought gambling to Detroit, some people, I remember Mitch Albom was kind of against it because he was using the Atlantic City example that, kind of ruined things in Atlantic City. I don't know enough about it. I just remember hearing the discussion. I'm not one way or the other. I just worry. I'm a worrier. There's some tough times out there, and I don't want to do anything that can hurt some of the mom and pops out there. I mean, retail and restaurants are really tough, and I'm not big on any of that discretionary income going to some website that just doesn't really employ anyone locally. Helps the taxes, I guess, but I don't know. I don't know enough about dynamics in commerce. I shouldn't comment. But no, I've not. And I don't judge. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I would be the furthest away from being prone to or interested in gambling, sports gambling. So for me to move the needle a little bit, be like, oh, geez, that sounds like a sure thing. I'll just download that app and do that thing. And so I can imagine other people are probably floor to the boards, full steam ahead. Yeah, I'm in. And that's great. You do hope the people can handle it, just like drinking and everything else. Drinking ruins families. It does. And gambling ruins families too. And I'm not here to preach and I don't judge, but I'm concerned. I remember talking about this with a friend of mine. I was texting him a couple of days ago. I'm like, if these gambling apps had been around when I was 20, 21, 22 years old, even though I was broke, could I have been enticed to do that and developed a problem? Probably. And my friend was like, yeah, me too. And I've got some nephews, college-age kids, and to them, it's just there's a normalization of it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it can be dangerous for some people. I've stayed away from it. I don't know, but I don't know. There's going to be some tragedies. There will be. But no, I've not done it. I'm not saying I never will. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's careful. I don't mean to preach. I'm not trying to preach. I'm just worried. I'm concerned about the people out there, right? And maybe I am too old, I am too. Maybe I'm a little too tight. Maybe I need to loosen up a little bit. Maybe I need to do shots on the air here. Maybe that'll loosen things up a little bit. What do we got? Jaeger? Chris Rynham says, I forgot the Matt Harms was at BYU. BYU was up by 12. Yes, the former Purdue center. Comp, all good. We're not hearing anything. Oh, yep. So you didn't hear anything? Looks like it's okay now, but, it's all good. All right. Anyway, have you considered doing a live stream for games? You know, some people do that, like a watch-along party, and I'm not sure those are all that successful or all that interesting. So no. Plus, I'm working. I'm taking notes because I have to write something immediately after the game. So live streaming it, no. You know, I don't know. No. Thanks for asking, though. Detroit Spartan says that Jalen Hunt is an NFL lock. Excuse me. Noah says, evening, folks. Bill Taylor says Costello makes some bank over there. Does he? Does Matt Costello do well in Europe? I can see that. Good for him. It's like trying to sell a car without having the car on the lot. Talking about recruiting. It's a really good analogy. Very tough. Visits are crucial, especially if you're trying to build something. And especially with Tucker, who's got something to sell. It's hampered the process. It's kept them, they're spinning their wheels. They're recruiting okay, but they could be doing more. Kenneth Roberts says, good evening, Comp. Enjoying a new glass of rosé. Rosé. Good for you. Noah says, some in-state kids were not even considering Michigan State before Tucker was hired. A couple said the energy during their visit that last week before COVID was unmatched. It's a good point. Dylan Tatum came in at that time. Hampton Fay was in around that time. And they got Hampton Fay. Yeah, it's been, I don't mean to belabor the point, but it's a point. It's a point. And I know they're dying to get people on campus so they can really get rolling with recruiting. And you have to hope that in June it will. And, you know, I'm saying this and people are going to say, and if it does open up and then they don't have like 10 4-stars commit in the next 3 months, people are going to like, Comparoni, what happened? I thought you said they were going to start recruiting better once they open it up. And they will. I'm not saying they're going to recruit a top 10 class, but it would help. They will do better. I'm Off Planet says, what do you think it's going to take for us to get a 7 seed in the tournament? Wisconsin is projected to be a 6. And they won one more game, and we beat better teams. That's a good point. I think if Michigan State wins the Big Ten tournament, they could be a 7. Mr. Bowman says, wow, another 3 from BYU. Angelo Gross Enthusiast says, thoughts on Jacob Allen? I don't know. Still looking into the Jacob Allen thing. Offensive lineman from New Jersey, the Hunt School. 4-star. I'll get back to you on that one. Doors Fan 91 says, how do you think this staff is recruiting in the Midwest? Feels like recruits in the South and out West are getting more attention. It's a good point. I mean, they're extending the recruiting borders further sooner. You know, D'Antonio would go further away if they didn't get anything in the vicinity, immediate vicinity. Then they'd go further later, and it'd be hard to get in the door. These guys, you know, Tucker's got those guys watching so much video that they're able to get through it. They've gotten through it quicker. That's why they're offering 2023s and some 2024s. In the process, while they're going through all this video, they say, oh, there's a guy from Phoenix. We like him. He meets our criteria. Let's offer him. And he lives in Phoenix, but they're already out there. And you throw enough mud on the wall, like Nick Saban used to say, and eventually some of it sticks. Hey, the guy in Phoenix likes us. You're buzzing like a bee, Comp. Let me take that down. There we go. Sorry. All good now. Oh, maybe. I'm not sure what happened there. Doors Fan 91 says, I like the Walker kid from Cass Tech. He said if MSU lets him go to Kentucky. Be sad if MSU lets him go to Kentucky. We're talking about Deion Walker, defensive tackle. Michigan State's got a chance. His video is okay. I mean, he's a big guy. I don't doubt that he's more of an offensive lineman. I think that's what Kentucky likes him as. As a defensive tackle, he's a big guy, but I kind of like the Derek Harmon kid they got last year a little bit more in that category. And you don't want to have a bunch of guys in that category, although that category is rare. But I think Harmon's better than Walker as a defensive tackle. But as an offensive lineman, I think he's got something. But that's a tough call. But yeah, Michigan State's kind of seems like they've slowed down on that one. Hayden Roberts says, if you had to predict today, who do you think State gets for their quarterback? Detroit Spartan says Comp has a pet duck. Yeah, pet duck. My call is the duck. That's what the quack was. It used to be the theme for Hockey Night in Canada, which is one of the great all-time sports songs. It's the Canadian equivalent to the Monday Night Football theme. Better, though. Then I stopped doing it because on podcasts, YouTube podcast, I'm not sure if that's copyright material. And if you have copyright music on, you can get an X from YouTube and get yanked off the air and all kinds of other terrible things. They'll put you in thumb screws and they'll throw you overboard in the Cuyahoga River, all kinds of bad things. So I changed my ringtone. So I didn't want anything that could be copyright music infringement. So I changed it to a duck. Funny you should mention that. Today I was over the baseball field with the guys, throwing some batting practice because the school team is on pause. So I just had a couple guys out here throwing some batting practice. Pause ends tomorrow. They'll be back to school practice tomorrow. I'll be a part of that. But anyway, today, so we're out at a park in the East Lansing area. And I was supposed to do a talk show with Huge out of Grand Rapids at 5:30. And I told the guys on the bench, because I put my phone on the bench while they're throwing batting practice. I'm like, if you hear a quack, let me know, because that's my ringtone, and I'm supposed to go on a radio show. So they're listening. And we're at this park that has these wetlands. I'm not kidding. And there's ducks around. And they quack, and it sounds like a duck when they quack. But it's the exact same time and cadence. And I'm telling you, I would hear a duck quack, and I'd come and answer my phone. And they're like, no. It was funny. These ducks sound exactly like my ringtone. And 4 or 5 times, I stopped pitching to come answer the phone. But no, that was an actual duck. And then when the thing did ring and it did quack, people are like, is that a duck or the phone? Anyway, it's a long story, but yeah, I got a pet duck. Anyway, Hayden Roberts says, if you had to predict today, who do you think State gets for their quarterback? Seems like a quarterback would accelerate that recruiting class. Yeah, man, I don't know. They're still figuring out what they have, beneath their grade A guys, Duffy and that type of situation. That's going to be a tough one. Don't feed it bread. Don't feed the duck bread. Get your tinfoil hats on. Hayden Vischer says, tuning in for hour 2 of the show. We're in hour 2. What time is it? Yeah, we're 2 hours, 10 minutes in. That's longer than usual. Watch your mouth, James. Sorry about that. It's not going to happen again. MSU Hunter Spartan says, glad the Spartans got to win Sunday versus Michigan. Just don't see this Spartan team doing much in the Big Ten tournament or the NCAA. Just don't have enough talent. Point well taken. You might be right. Detroit Spartan says, I don't think anyone's all that worried about making a run, but that scum victory was big for many reasons. I agree. Just keeping the tournament streak alive was big. Alone was big, he says. Facts, says Hayden Visser. Gordon Sonona says, call him St. Izzo. St. Izzo, that's a good way to put it. Remember when Damon the Dog Perry used to call Nick Saban St. Nick? Or was it Greg Henson that mockingly would call him St. Nick? I don't know. That's back in the 90s. Those of you that remember WDFN, the forerunner for Sports Talk in Detroit, they did a good job for a number of years. Detroit Spartan says, anything else is butter or gravy, whether they prefer butter or gravy. Kirk Baldwin says, how about a comparison, Lepo, to Dave Mudge in the 1990s? Dave Mudge was good. Canadian kid, right? Was he from St. Catharines, Ontario? No. Woodbury, Ontario? Wilbury, Ontario? Anyway, Mudge was good. I watched him. He came in after, let's see, Mudge was late 80s, right? Solid. But I didn't watch him as critically as I watch players now. So my frame of reference on Mudge, I remember him, but I don't remember. Maybe you do, Kirk. Maybe you know more, remember Mudge better than I do. Mudge was still on the team in 95. He was in the early 90s because I think he was on that bowl team when they lost to LSU in 1995, Saban's first year. And Mudge had a lot of trouble against LSU in that bowl game. That's why that came back to my memory a little bit. He was solid. But I remember him being a big offensive tackle that didn't quite have great enough. See, it's coming back to me now. The lateral movement was not great. And that was coming from the Perlis years. He was a Perlis recruit. And then Saban with Ken Manny was trying to reshape some of those guys. I think Mudge was the left tackle when Flozell was still the right tackle. Then after Mudge left, Flozell switched over to the left side. Flozell, as many of you know, was a right tackle because he was deaf in the right ear. So on the left ear, he could hear the cadence better. So moving over to left tackle was kind of new to Flozell, but he worked it out. But Mudge, I'm going to say Lepo, you have to hope, has better feet than Mudge. But Mudge was a big guy and filled out real nice. So frame-wise, I'll give you that. That's a good one. You really, that was a thinker. And I kind of worked through it. Doors fan says, I hope Lepo's better than John Deo. Yeah, John Deo didn't stay long. Then he transferred to Western Michigan, right? Bill Self, the definition of dirty. Detroit Spartan says, I agree with Nils on this one. Gordon Tonona says, it means giving out the Benjamins. Alex Calder says, is there a chance that Boachi still comes? I thought that ship had sailed. We talked about that earlier. Not that I'm aware of. And like I said, usually when someone decommits, that ship has sailed. And you look at Michigan State's roster of big men, and if he wants to reclassify, and if Bates reclassifies, there's just, there's some decent big men like Matty Sissoko having trouble getting playing time. If you're a big guy going to Michigan State right now, like Boachi, might not be the best place to go. They'd love to have him, probably still, but I kind of understand it. MSU Hunter Spartan says, field goal percentage. I don't know what all this is. I can't read that. Detroit Spartan says, the sky's blue. Hayden Roberts says, hope Coach D is enjoying his birthday. Spartan Dog. MSU Hunter, no negative waves. Jacob Terry says, do we have a chance at Rouser? Miles Rouser. That's another guy I kind of wanted to watch this weekend in Brighton, but he's on a 7-on-7 team, but his team was not entered in that tournament. But yeah, State's got a chance. They're in there. Kid from Belleville. Jacob, I got to ask you, that picture that you show, is that your son or is that you? Yeah, let me know. Hayden Roberts says, looks like Arkansas. Detroit Spartan says, Coach D had a very good birthday. MSU Hunter says, just the facts, meaningless. Slovenia. Lord Beck was from Slovenia. Okay. MSU Hunter Spartan says, not a good shooting team, smaller team, poor rebounding team, defense comes and goes, no start in the middle. You're talking about Michigan State currently and why you don't think they're going to go far in the NCAA tournament. You might be right. But I think the defense comes and goes. I think it's coming more than it's going now. I think the defense is getting squared away, especially ball screen defense with the bigs helping out, knowing what to do. And the way they can interchange those guys, keep them fresh. And Rocket Watts getting over those ball screens against Michigan was good. They did it differently in both of those games. And I wonder if that's going to carry over now. I want to go back and watch, if I have time, I want to watch the Indiana games a little bit more and look to see what Michigan State was doing ball screen defense-wise, because I think they changed it for the Michigan game. I know that they went over it in both games, and then in the second half they went under ball screens, and that's when Michigan got up for the three-pointers. I mentioned that in the .comp the day after the game when I wrote the article, okay, what's new, or okay, what's the damage and what's next? That one talked about them going under ball screens. If I had it, I could have brought the video out here, but I didn't get it prepared. I would have liked to, but they went under ball screens. Michigan got some open three-pointers, blew the game open. Second game, Michigan actually hit a couple three-pointers, hit some more difficult ones, but Michigan State never went under ball screens the whole game, except for one time Malik Hall went under a ball screen, and they hit a three-pointer, and Izzo was very upset about it. He was not supposed to do that. But Michigan State played pretty good defense in the first half against Michigan, going over ball screens, made it work. Michigan still shot a good percentage in the first half for some other reasons, but that part of it was still good. And they took that part of it and played it in the second game, but they didn't do it in the second half. And the things that went awry in the second half in the first game, defensively, they didn't do them in the second game. They did play big in the second game, but they didn't go under ball screens. They made it work. Yeah, probably should do that with a telestrator. It's hard to describe that. Detroit Spartan says, and we still beat 3 top 5 teams, and our record-setting tournament streak continues. Getting back to MSU Hunter Spartan, he says, not a good shooting team. That's true. But table that one a little bit also, because now that they've got some rest, watch Hauser and Langford, Gabe Brown. It's possible they could become a 40% three-point shooting team in some games from this point forward. I'm not predicting it. I'm just saying don't close the door on a fresh set of Spartans and what it's going to look like. We don't know what it's going to look like. Smaller team, you say. Well, they start Hall and Marble. They're not a small team against a lot of opponents. They're small against Illinois. They're small against Michigan at the center position. And Michigan's got, they got the 7'1" kid. And Wagner's big at 6'9". You don't really realize how big that guy is. So small compared to some teams in the Big Ten, but Michigan State's not going to be small against other teams across the country. Now, I haven't watched every team in the country, and I don't have a spreadsheet on how tall people are, along the front line. But you're mentioning that in terms of being a hindrance for Michigan State's NCAA tournament chances. I'm not sure it's a hindrance against a lot of teams. I don't think Michigan State's a small team against most teams. Defense comes and goes. I disagree. No stud in the middle. True. But how many teams do have a stud in the middle? Not many. Poor rebounding team. Now, they out-rebounded Michigan by 10 in the last game. We'll see if they can continue to keep that up. Great defense can lead to better rebounding. And Nils was talking earlier about Michigan State improving offensive rebounding, which has never quite clicked in a whole lot this year. You make some great points. I appreciate your post. I'm not saying you're wrong. I just took a couple of those and said, don't close the door on those subjects just yet. What do we have here? Detroit Spartan says, you won't find a single person on this stream that thinks Michigan State's a complete great team currently. True. Detroit Spartan laughing at me. I don't know what I did. Russ Humphrey says, nice story. Thanks. Oh, that must have been the Lorbeck story. Yeah. That was a good one, huh? Old Tuck says, Willie, the polar bear Comerford. Old Tuck finally in attendance. Old Tuck is late. The polar bear, Willie Comerford. The polar bear was a good one. And Hubert Boo Boo Thompson. That was the same year, right? Were they the same year? Close to it, back in the Saban years. Foul trouble and leg cramps, no doubt. Paul could shoot. Yeah, foul trouble, leg cramps. Had the leg cramps in that Wisconsin game when Chris Hill missed the free throws, right? That was 2004. Then the next year in 2005, this is something people don't know. I was sitting right behind the bench when Michigan State was playing Kentucky. That triple overtime game. Was it triple overtime? Overtime against Kentucky in the Elite Eight. And Paul Davis came to the bench and was cramping up again. This was 12 months after cramping up in that Wisconsin game. And they're rubbing his legs. I don't think TV ever caught it. And Izzo's like, what's going on? And the trainer's like, he's cramping. And Izzo was like, I'm going to get beat because in the Elite Eight, and we're going to lose the Final Four because Davis is getting cramps again. But you know what? I don't know what happened. Rubbed it out, so to speak. And Davis limped out there, finished the game, and it didn't lock up like it did against Wisconsin. But for a moment there, in the heat of the battle, in that epic game against Kentucky, Paul Davis was coming down with a serious case of the cramps once again. But he could shoot, didn't get a chance to shoot much at Michigan State. Little John Flowers, says Bill Taylor. Except Little John was his given name. It's not a nickname. So technically, that's not part of this category. MSU Hunter Spartan says, nice wins against Ohio State, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan. Bad losses to Michigan, Maryland, Rutgers, Minnesota, Purdue, Northwestern, Iowa. Big is tough this year. True, the bad losses points-wise to Michigan and Maryland, I'm putting an asterisk on them. They count. I understand that. But those games got away specifically because Michigan State was out of gas. Period, point, end of paragraph. The last 50 minutes of those games don't count. They don't count if you're trying to analyze whether the team is good or not. And that's something I learned years ago, and I've talked about this before, when you watch conference championship games. The championship game, do not judge a team by how they play in a conference championship game, even if they win. Because it's their third game in 3 days or fourth game in 4 days, and they're going to be, on defense, they're going to be sloppy. And I made that mistake a couple of times. One time in 2001, doing the pre-tip read, Spartan Plus, I was breaking down Michigan State against their first-round opponent, Alabama State. And I'd only watched Alabama State once because Alabama State was only on TV once. And back then, I videotaped, back in the old VCR days, I videotaped like every game from February 15th on, so that when Michigan State, whoever they drew in the first round, second round, I'd have a tape of it. And I had a tape of Alabama State. And I had a tape of Alabama State in their conference championship game. And they were terrible. And then they came out against Michigan State, and the score was like a 2-point game at halftime. I'm like, who the hell is this? That's not the team I saw on tape. And then 3 years ago in 2004, I still hadn't learned my lesson, but this is when I learned the lesson. 2004 when Michigan State played Nevada in the first round. They lost to Nevada. Kirk Snyder and some other guys. I watched them in their conference championship game, and they looked terrible. Well, they're not any good. I remember talking to Doug Wojcik about it. He was an assistant coach at the time. He's like, I think they look pretty good. I'm like, really? And I think I might have had one other tape of Nevada. I think they had like one win against Syracuse. They had like one good win in the regular season, but it was against Zone, I think, maybe Syracuse. I don't know. But I put more stock into what I saw in the conference championship game. I'm like, they're not very good. Then they came out against Michigan State, and I was like, who's this team? Then they won another game and went to the Sweet 16. And that's when I said, oh, they're playing in a conference championship game. And that's right around the time that Izzo was educating us on, how you look, depending on how tired you are, has a big impact on how you play, obviously. I mean, do I need to be that stupid to realize it? A lot of people out there that still don't realize it and don't believe it, but it's true. As Duffy Doherty used to say, it's not who you play, it's when you play them a lot of times, or where you play them. And in college basketball, you may have played 3 games in 6 days, so the team's fresh as a daisy. Big difference. So, just as I was wrong in underestimating Nevada in 2004 and Alabama State in 2001, anybody that watches Michigan State against Maryland or Michigan in those 2 road games and thinks that's what Michigan State is, you're wrong, and you're going to get fooled. I'm not saying Michigan State's great. I'm just saying those 2 games are a spoiled specimen. Throw them out. All right, Hayden Fisher says, $1 in a swear jar. My bad. Detroit Spartan, glad you felt the need to share that information. I don't know what you guys talk about. You guys talk amongst yourselves. See, I'm reading these things in the chat area, and people that come back and watch this when it's not live, when it's taped, sometimes on YouTube, the chat area is on there, and they can see what I'm talking about, and sometimes it's not on there. I don't control that. At least I don't think I control that. Sometimes it's on, sometimes it's not. So if people are watching it, the taped version, they're like, what's he reading? What are these comments? I'd like it better if they're able to read along the comments with me. And there might be a good comment or question coming up that I've not read yet that you guys are waiting for me to get to. I don't know. Old Tug says, good for a big, decent, inconsistent in general. Gordon Sonota says, Rush Prost coaches at Valdosta, Georgia. Prost led a double life when he coached in Alabama. He had a girlfriend with 3 kids with her, along with his wife and 3 kids. That's true. And Valdosta still hired him. Old Tug says Chris Hill was a good shooter. He was. And he never quite morphed into being a good lead guard, good point guard. He was point guard size, but never quite had the knack of being a point guard. Detroit Spartan says for his size, Paul was a very good shooter, especially in high school. He was. Oh, you're talking about Paul Davis. Yeah, Paul Davis. Paul Davis had more skill than he was ever really able to show at Michigan State. I love Izzo, but that's one guy that I think could have been more of a stretch 4 pick and pop guy. I've never talked to Izzo about that. Maybe I'm afraid to mention that to him. Izzo might say, hey, man, I coached him in 800 practices. I know what we were doing with him. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Chris Hill was probably the most inconsistent pure shooter we've ever had, Detroit Spartan said. I would agree with that for his senior year. Senior year, he kind of went in the tank, got in a slump, and was just. But like his first 3 years was a really good shooter. 4th year, just like Adam Ballinger. All right. I was out of the screen there in that one. Old Tuck says, probably Jason Klein, actually. Jason Klein was inconsistent. So was Mike Chappelle. MSU Hunter Spartan says, can't bury your head in sand. MSU is a middle-of-the-pack team. Middle of what pack? Middle of what pack? MSU Hunter Spartan is steadfast in his belief that Michigan State is mediocre. And yes, they've been mediocre to this point, just like in 2003. But you're not going to be remembered to this point if things happen beyond here. And I'm not closing the door on that possibility. Noah says Crouch was actually a 5-star at one point. Heck of an athlete. Talking about the guy at Tennessee that's looking to transfer somewhere. Michigan State's in the middle of it. He's a Georgia guy. Old Tuck says, but you're right on the right track. Detroit Spartan says, probably not. I've never seen a shooter get that hot and then ice cold for weeks. Old Tuck says, the kid from Georgia was inconsistent, more so than Hill. Chris Allen talking about. All right, you guys talking amongst yourselves. I'll just let that go. I think that's about it. Vincero says, Izzo should have recruited Jalen Terry. That's the kid from Flint that's at Oregon right now, right? Yeah, they did get him, and they had a commitment from him. And then the apple cart got upset a little bit. Too many cooks in the kitchen. You got to wait. Old Tuck says Hill was a better shooter than Klein and Allen. Most of the time he was. The kid from Stevensville Lakeshore is a point guard. Okay, interesting. Now you're talking about Jalen Terry. Basically, Izzo picked Hoggard over Terry. That was a big mistake, Vincero said. Michigan State didn't know they were going to lose Terry when they went with Hoggard, but that did upset the apple cart. Had to do over again. That'd be an interesting question to ask them. Pig Miller was a great nickname, says Kirk Baldwin. I'll agree with that. Pig Miller might be the winner. That might be the best recruit nickname. And Pig Miller was a recruit, then he became a Spartan. But right now, the kid from Georgia is just a recruit. But I'm going to go with Pig over Big Dooley. But Big Dooley is creative. I'm going to ask him what's that about. Oh, Old Tuck is saying I'll settle it. Settle what? There's no argument. You guys still talking about the better shooter? I mean, you can pull out the numbers. Chris Hill was a very good shooter for his first 3 years, not his fourth year. If you're putting it all on his fourth year, then yes, he was mediocre. But he was not mediocre or inconsistent his first 3 years as a long-range shooter. Jason Klein was inconsistent. Chris Allen was a pretty good shooter. I don't know if he was ever inconsistent. I think he was just always like that 38% guy, right? If you're asking me who's better, Chris Hill in the first 3 years would be better than those other guys as a shooter. In my opinion, doesn't mean I'm right. Doors Fan 91 says Grant Gondirazek is the kid's name from Lakeshore. He's a great shooter. His dad played in the NBA, mom college ball. How tall is he? Grant Gondirazek. I'm going to write that one down. As long as I don't lose this piece of paper. Man, it'd be nice to go watch a high school basketball game again someday. It's clear that Hill was more consistent, no argument, says Old Tuck. Laughing out loud overall, maybe, but he went from setting records to not making a shot for almost an entire season. You can both be right on that, as a matter of fact. That never happened with Allen or Klein. Well, Klein's high water mark was never as high as Chris Hill's was. They were inconsistent for 4 years, Old Tuck says. Klein was inconsistent for 4 years. Allen, was he inconsistent? I'm not sure about him. He just kind of was what he was. Vincero says Terry was never gonna sign. Then why did he commit? Old Tuck says your memory's going south. Troy Spartan doesn't like that. He says they weren't on his level. They never got that hot, you guys. Now we got some ageism from Detroit Spartan, and it's getting ugly. We don't like ageism, Detroit Spartan. Because I'm a little bit old myself. So Detroit Spartan says comparing him to Klein and Allen doesn't even make sense. Well, it does make sense because they're both wing guards and they're both kind of shooters. Old Tuck says he says they were never as hot or cold, never, not even close. That's true. Klein and Allen never had like that Chris Hill like really hot streak. And then they never went as cold either. I'm sure Klein had some cold strings of 3 or 4 games, but not like Hill did. So you can both be right. His three-point shooting as a freshman, 66 of them making 45%, was central in the Spartans reaching the 2002 tournament. That's true. Chris Hill was 45% from three-point range as a freshman. Thanks for digging that up. Those are nice numbers. And they did have to have those numbers. That was the year after Marcus Taylor went pro. Now Old Tuck is accusing Detroit Spartan of having glaucoma. Now, at the outset of these shows, I ask everybody to get along and to be respectful. Be respectful of your elders like me. You don't have to be respectful to me. I can handle it for the most part. I guess everybody has their point. Career low by far, 37% of his long-range shots. Who is that? Chris Hill was 37%. Hill's legacy, however, is dampened by a dismal finish brought on by a bizarre case of fading confidence late in his career. As a senior in 2005, he averaged less than 9 points per game and made career low by far 37% of his long-range shots. 37% is still productive from three-point range. I would have thought it would have been less than that. 9 points a game, not good. Came off the bench. He did go off the cliff pretty bad. MSU Hunter says, I know you are, but what am I? So now we're getting into Pee Wee Herman stuff. No, he didn't say that. I'm joking. MSU Hunter Spartan says, I also don't remember Klein being a great shooter, but could be wrong. You're right. He was not a great shooter. He came in with a reputation of being a great shooter, but never was. All right, let me just, I'll leave that to you guys. I'm not going to read any more of those. You guys are arguing. The knives are coming out. It's getting ugly. Looks like nobody else. This comp is old. There we go. And that's the name of that tune. So you can both be right. All right. I want to thank all our sponsors. I want to thank the Academy. I want to thank my MC. Hey, thanks for joining us. Sorry it was more than a week this time. Sorry it went long, 2.5 hours. That sets an indoor record for length for SpartanMag Live. I'm sure we put some people to sleep. I'm sure we made some people excited to talk Michigan State sports among friends on a Tuesday night from this show originating from East Lansing, Michigan. Going out to all you guys Spartan Maggers everywhere. Got a big game on Thursday. It's going to be noon. I don't want you guys drinking at work. But if you're working at home, feel free. Do so responsibly. Watch out for those betting apps. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for everybody. Thanks for Don Strait and his support, everybody else's support over the years and all the time. Big game on Thursday. Coverage continuing at SpartanMag.com. Become a SpartanMag.com subscriber right now. I should have said that a long time ago. Should be doing some more cross-marketing. Didn't do it. But hopefully people that are not SpartanMag subscribers that come here that see this, hopefully it occurred to them way earlier in the show. SpartanMag.com. I should go check that out. Yes, you should. Anyway, thanks to everybody. We'll see you next time. My name is Jim Comparoni. Been watching SpartanMag Live from East Lansing, Michigan. Go check out SpartanMag.com.